The departments have decorated their office doors. It's a tradition prior to COVID that the staff would decorate the doors. Due to COVID and kind of the restrictions of milling around and going about town hall, it was on a hiatus for the last two Christmases, but they have done it again this year. So if time prevails or avails itself, folks can go around. Both the basement floor, first floor, and second floor are decorated. You guys can take a look if you can't do it tonight. If you come back to pay your taxes, go see the town clerk, Parks and Rec, engineering, or any of those departments, go take a look. It is really festive and it looks great, and hats off to the staff for bringing that back and bringing some holiday cheer to us all. Going forward, we have a presentation tonight. We do this every so often. I think we're doing it once a month now, or once every 2 months. Chief, you guys have your captain lieutenants with you, Chief, to give a report on some police activity in our town.
Good evening, Mayor, councilors. For those who don't know me, my name is Rafael Medina, Chief of Police here in the Wethersfield Police Department. I think we agreed to do this every other month now, so next presentation is probably going to be a little bit different when we start comparing the data, because this is almost like a 3-month combined data. So next time I can compare these 2 months to the next 2 months, and it'll be a clearer view of what's going on. So let's start out. There were a total of 121 motor vehicle accidents during the months of November and October and November. As you can see, 73 in October, which was an increase from 65 in September. And then we had 48 in November, which was a decrease of 25. And this is what I'm referring to when you start looking at numbers. When you start doing 2 months, it starts getting a little convoluted. So you see an increase in 1 month, then you see a drop off in another. And we're asking ourselves, well, where do we get that decrease? How do we get it? And where were our accidents? You see the majority of our accidents are on Wells Road, Silas, Deane, Berlin Turnpike, Silas, Deane, and then the hours of 12 to 8 o'clock at night. Those hours do vary from month to month. October was from 13 to 15, and then November was a bigger gap. And then the days of the week. Those are the high days, Monday, Wednesday, Saturday, but it's pretty much every day of the week when I look at the data, except for Sundays. And here's the map where you can see where the majority of our accidents occur. Like I said, Berlin Turnpike, Silas, Deane, and Wells. So I guess the next question would be, well, what are we doing to combat that? How do we get that down? Well, that's the biggest question, our deployment of our resources. So with that, we concentrated our resources in that area, and this is what we have done. Conducted 868 motor vehicle stops during a 2-month period, 294 infractions issued, 21 summonses, 92 warnings, and 449 verbal warnings. And then you have the additional selective enforcement patrols for a hazardous operation. So now, this is the prior map that we had that shows our accidents. Then you see our enforcement efforts, and it's in the same exact spot. So we're out there. We're trying to hit those hot spots. Just also have to keep in mind those hot spots are on the borders. So we're very cautious on that. But we're going for the hazardous moving up violations, the stop signs, the red lights, things of that nature. And we also had 3 DWIs. But I want to get to the bigger one first, and I'll go back. So if you look at this right here, this is, as you know, we had the new traffic officer start in September. This is his stats just by himself. The cell phone violations, 211. And you can see the breakdown. 8, failure to drive right. 4, no lights illuminated. 3, red light violations, 16. Speed 4. Stop signs, 132 for a total of 389. So we're out there, we're hitting moving violations, we're trying to bring it down. So we have to start looking at how we're going to still combat these issues, where we need to deploy our resources accordingly. But I'll go back. Like I said, we had 3 DWI arrests. Other costs for service have been taking up our time. 40 parking tickets issued, for the 24-hour overnight violations. Like I said prior, we'd give the warnings first, and then we go and ticket them. So they received the warning first, more than likely, and then they were ticketed for a second offense. We're not just going to ticket the ticket. Give everyone the opportunity to correct their action before we take action. I just covered that part. And our cost for service, 4,952 costs for service, which is a decrease. So our costs for service are going down a little bit. But, I haven't delved into the reason why on that. It's just usually around this time of the year, our costs for service change. We're starting to see more of an uptick with dealing with emotionally disturbed persons. So a lot of our resources are going to that with the ambulance services. So 1830 for 911 calls, that's also decreased. 103 in custody arrests. That's not including the 58 that we did by warrant. So you imagine 4 officers per shift for a 2-month period with the cost for service, with the arrest in custody, with the warrant service, with the motor vehicle stops. These men and women are doing a phenomenal job out there trying to combat the issues in this town. Burglary complaints, we had 6, 5 residential, 1 commercial. That was a decrease from the 15 we had back in August that we talked about. So those are going down. Surprisingly, knock on wood, during this time of the year. Because we know that this time of the year we see uptick in burglaries, especially when it's getting dark out earlier. Some of the highlights that I want to talk about, the good things about the PD, Lieutenant Michael Connolly just graduated from the 148th Administrator's Officer course in Louisville, Kentucky on November 10th. And unfortunately he's not here tonight. But however, AOC, they have 2 different academic areas, one for the undergrad and one for the graduate students. And Lieutenant Connolly was the valedictorian for the undergrad AOC. So that's a testament to his work and what he did there. He represented the town and the PD tremendously. So I'm truly happy for him and what his accomplishments are. Starting in January, we just hired another lateral female from a surrounding town. She'll be starting on January 16th. She has 2 years of law enforcement experience, so we'll be bringing her over. And then on December 26th, we just hired an entry-level officer. He'll be attending the academy on the 29th. By the time he gets out of the academy 6 months later, then off FTO, we're looking at about a year before he's viable on the road, but at least we have somebody at the entry level coming in to offset the lateral, so we're still working on that. And just officer recognition, kudos to the 3 officers involved. I know you're aware of this, but we had a residential structure fire here in the town of Weathersfield on December 12th. Officer Kavana was the first one on scene. She was advised by the wife of the occupant, another male occupant, that her husband was still inside in the basement. She approached the front door, bellowing smoke coming out. She couldn't get into the front door. The other 2 officers arrived, which are DiLoretto and Ochoa. They heard sounds of him coming from the basement. They were able to make entry into the residence through the garage door. Downstairs, they located him incoherent in the bathroom, and they were able to grab onto him and pull him out before the house was engulfed in flames. So that was an outstanding job on those 3 officers' part, risking themselves and saving a life. So that just shows you, policing is above and beyond, motor vehicle stops and in custody arrests. We're out there serving the public every which way we can. So a great kudos to them and what they do and, how we serve this town. So that's a huge testament to them. So I'm happy about that. So we're doing good things with this PD. So like I promised, I kept it short for you because I know you have other pressing issues. So if you have any questions for me, that is my presentation for this evening.
Great. Thank you, Chief. Any questions for the Chief? Comments? Councilman Forrest?
Chief, I'd like, first of all, I just want to commend the bravery with the house fire. We certainly read about it on the council, and it doesn't necessarily get a lot of maybe the news media is not necessarily here for that, but just please commend your officers that were doing their job, but that doesn't mean it's easy to do your job.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Councilman.
So please do that, and also to Officer Connolly for the valedictorian and serving our town, and and outside of our town very well. So please commend him with that as well. Just as a follow-up to the conversation we had about 60 days ago, which was wondering if I get that information on, I remember there was ticketing for non-moving vehicle offenses, whether it was like parking tickets and the rest of that. And I think that your system allows you to designate that out for the code that is being ticketed for. I was wondering if we could just get some data. I don't think that I received the data, and you were going to be working on that.
No, you didn't.
Just a follow-up on that.
Lieutenant Rodriguez is working on that, and we're working on the next-gen system. And we're trying to figure out ways to recode our stops. We have multiple codings for the same offenses.
Right.
And we need to start narrowing it down, drilling down, so that way it becomes simpler to review our data. So we're starting to work with NextGen. Now, Captain Matrui's been talking to NextGen and start updating our system to make sure it's more streamlined. So we are working on it.
I believe it. And so that was just sort of a gentle reminder, as they say.
No, I know.
Yeah,
I know,
and
Councilman.
then, because I think we're also working on the quality of life, sort of ordinance violations, but they sort of border both building and zoning, but also police enforcement, and we're just sort of trying to figure out that interplay between all of the departments and recognize some of the concerns of the citizens. And we've had that ongoing conversation. I think this data might help us understand the extent or non-extent to the case may be of the issue. So thanks a lot for that, and happy holidays to you and your staff.
You too.
I wish
Appreciate
you
it.
a safe holiday in all that you do.
Appreciate it, Councilman.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Lesser?
Thank you, Mayor. Chief, thank you for this report and all the great work that you and your team are doing. One additional comment and one question. Additional comment is, and we've talked a little bit about this, we've heard throughout town that speeding is a real concern of residents, and what you're doing to address that is much appreciated. I think I've told you, I've heard personally from many, many residents that are concerned about speeding, particularly on our main thoroughfares, but others, so appreciate the efforts. And my question is about the arrest. There was a slide up there, I think it said 100, you don't have to bring it up back, I think it said 103 arrests. I don't know if that is a month or, yeah, 103 for October. If that's higher than normal, lower, and if there's maybe categories where you're seeing those arrests predominantly, what people are being arrested for.
I could get that for you. I have that data because I don't have it in this presentation. I don't have the monthly reports with me, but my commanders give me monthly reports, and it actually breaks it down. So I could get that for you and show you month by month and what we're doing and how they're coming in. So those 103 arrests are based on stops and initiatives on our officers, whereas the warrant arrest could be prawns or people turning themselves in, so you have to dull it down.
A little different, yeah.
The 103 in-custody arrests are by activities of our officers.
Thank you, that's all I had, and like Councilor Forrest, thank you for everything, and happy holidays to you and your team. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Same to you, Councilman.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Deputy Mayor?
Thanks again, Chief. There seems to be a little bit of activity on state property off of Silas, Deane, and Jordan Lane, where the 5 and 15 on and off ramps are. Possibly homeless people living there, or is there anything that, how do we get those people help if they are living there? I don't know if they are. And do you have any jurisdiction on state property, or is that a state police issue, or how do we deal with that?
We've tried to address it, and we continue to try to address it, Deputy Mayor. That is state property. We don't have jurisdiction there. All we can do is make the phone calls to the state, make them aware of it, and if we interact with them off of state property, i.e. right at Jordan and Silas, because they're walking from that encampment there, then we'll make contact and try to get them the resources that we can offer them. I reached out to my partners in Hartford, Jim Barrett. I'm sure you've seen him on TV. He was their homeless outreach person. I had him come down and speak to them, see if they could get them services as well that way. So we are taking the initiative and try to get them help. But once they're on that property, we've reached out to the state, or my lieutenants have reached out several times and made contact with the state DOT, and that's where we stand with that. So, but we're doing, once they step in our area, we talk to them.
Getting cold out there. So.
It is, and that's the biggest thing,
Thank you.
we need to get them the resources to keep them safe.
Great. Anybody else? Just real quick, Chief, and sorry to put you on the spot, but I was watching a program on PBS the other day on autism, and they had a great segment on, and I should know this, training for officers. Is there a requirement for the officers to be trained in how to interact? You had mentioned, this time of year, the holidays, and unfortunate, depression, comes with the holidays. But it just reminded me of the program where many of the adults that are interacting, even kids that are interacting with police with autism, find themselves in a difficult position of how to respond to some of the questions that are asked of them and interaction between our police officers. And I know our officers are top-notch officers. Have we seen a program, or is there a program for officers to learn how to interact with those, disabled who may, be on the spectrum or have, suicidal thoughts? Obviously, you guys work with those. But watching this program the other night just was really eye-opening for how a lot of communities are interacting with that population. Do we have a program in place for that with our officers?
We don't have a program per se specifically targeting that group, but our officers are trained, CIT trained, some, not all, the majority are crisis intervention, which touches on a lot of mental health issues. And you also have the blue envelopes that we pass out that talks about how to interact with individuals who have those types of issues. And we connect with the families. And we have, I know Lieutenant Renda, we deal with one individual here in town that we coordinate with her for autism outreach. So we're there, but when the training comes up, we'll send our officers, but far and few between when it comes to the training, when it comes to that.
Great. And thank you. Sorry to put you on the spot,
Yep.
but when I had saw it and I knew you would be coming and presenting to us tonight, I just wanted to get some information on that. Thank you. And I concur with everything that everybody said. Thank you for letting us know about that incident, the fire at that house, and the elderly gentleman. Thank goodness he was found, early enough, and kudos to our officers for getting there on time and then working diligently to get into the house. So,
I appreciate it.
thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Hearing none?
All right, appreciate it. Happy holidays to everyone.
You too.
See you after the new year.
I don't believe we have any hearings on ordinances or resolutions for introduction tonight. Or revolutions. Hopefully none of those tonight. General comments from the public. With this, I remind everybody, we have 2 public comment sessions, and one in the beginning at 5 minutes and one at the end for 5 minutes. And if you would, Sue, do you have the sign-up sheet still up there?
I do.
Okay.
There's one right at the podium.
Please sign up and let us know your name and address, and you would be limited to 5 minutes. So, anybody want to speak for the first part? Yes, sir.
Nick Rashu, 125 Walcott Hill. Few things as I was going through the agenda packet for today. The first is the Voice over Internet Protocol bid that's outstanding for $325,000. There's a line in there I just want to focus on just for a moment that was continued reliance on the current outdated system, subject to its potential failure, and limited ability to quickly replace failed parts was a rationale for spending $325,000. $75,000 for trunk, and the remainder for what I can only read as 5 years of phone service and a paging system and a video phone at the PD. And apparently the Board of Education's already adopted it, and the updates were in 2002 at the police department. I guess I'm flabbergasted at $65,000 a year if we had a system apparently that's been working since the mid-'80s and presumably is already past its useful life and still functional, that in 30-some-odd years we haven't been able to get our act together. Next, I want to move on to the Pitkin, which is $4.75 million of a grant proposal, which I'll remind everyone, grants are funded by someone, generally taxpayers, whether it's state or federal. Right now, I believe there was a discussion about ARPA funds going to the HVAC at the Pitkin Community Center. Oddly enough, there it is yet again in the grant proposal, and I recognize that there's $495,000 on 2 different line items out of $4.some-odd million related to design work. How can we ask for a grant if we don't know what the design is and what the cost is going to be? This is a school referendum all over again. And lastly, and most importantly, I read in the news, and obviously I was here for the meetings talking about the flag policy, and I started to dig into it and realize that free speech is important, and you can be offended, and it doesn't really matter. There's very few restrictions on freedom of speech. One of them is incitement of imminent lawless action. And the other one is, honestly, there's child pornography, some other things that are restrictive of free speech. And I realized as I was reading through the case of the Shirtlift case, which was the Boston case, which we've talked about at length, it was about money. Boston had to pay the lead plaintiff $2.1 million in legal fees. I read the statute or the proposed ordinance as it sits now that only 4 flags can be flown in Weathersfield. It should just be, if you want to fly your flag, you get it for 7 days, no content restrictions. The reason Boston got sued, the reason Boston taxpayers had to fund $2.1 million in legal fees was content-based restrictions. This ordinance is literally a solution looking for a problem. Let everybody fly whatever flag they want. If people are offended, that's what free speech is. Restricting speech to government-only speech on those flagpoles is an absolute waste of this town's time.
Anybody else? Mr. Young?
Good evening. Robert Young, 20 Copper Mill Road. At the last meeting, you had quite a discussion on this opportunities for, oh boy, what do we call it here? Recognition for certain people throughout the years. And I've mentioned it to you. I thought it was a slippery slope, if you had such a thing. It's also a political payback scheme that I could imagine going on many times. And I believe that the media does a good job of recognizing people, whether it's television or newspaper. I think the town should stay far from doing something like this. I know you still have some kind of recognition, but it seems like you want to create something on a full-time basis. You also had tonight, you're going to be talking about the fuel, unleaded gas for the town, 71,000 gallons. That's a lot of gallons. My only question on this is why don't we have a price per gallon on this in the agenda so we could see what the difference is? I mean, you guys buy gas in such a volume, and so much different than us retail people, and you're exempt from a lot of tax. So I just thought that it should have been in there. We could handle the price, at least reading it. I don't know if we can handle the dollars that go with it. You have another one tonight that is in your agenda regarding the Cove Park Preservation Fund and some dock improvements. There's a little statement in here that you have. It says the purchase of the longer ramp will provide better access to the dock when there is minor high water. And I got thinking about that, did they originally put the dock, the end that the people start to walk on to go out, down in the floodplain? I mean, that's the only thing that I could come up with. And if that's the case, shame on us for doing it, because now we're doing it the double. And that's something we shouldn't be doing. We have very smart people in the town hall here that help put these kind of things in, and you shouldn't be putting it in, but below the floodplain. It should be above the floodplain, so it doesn't so it doesn't go underwater. Next, you have this telephone contract for the town of Weathersfield. $325,000. And in here it also says, and it would include an integrated voice system and other features designed to improve productivity. How does government improve productivity? I've never seen it in government, Mayor. How many people will we lose if we buy this system to pay for it? That's what I'm looking for, and I would expect to see that in this analysis. How many people, if you're going to spend $352,000 on a brand-new system and say that it's designed to improve productivity, and productivity means we're going to need less people because your productivity increased, unless it's just a bunch of baloney that you put in here to sell it to the public. Talking about baloney. You had an article in the Wethersfield Post that said, pondering the future. What to do now that voters shot down a $278 million school referendum. Well, you know, they go through a couple of issues here about what they're going to do, and we citizens had the same opinion. What are we going to do if it passed? And a whole bunch of you people suggested and voted that it should pass. Yet, this article is just as brief on the 5 schools that they wanted to work on and end up with only 4. It's so brief, it's just about as brief as the presentation that we got from the Board of Education. What also is interesting is there's not a single word, not a single statement in here from what they call the Wethersfield Facilities Committee that recommended this whole stupid thing. And where were they in the article? And who are they? Were they like the Keisha Farm Committee? Or were they a committee part of the Board of Education? I mean, no statement. Poor, poor, poor. And they deserve to have it shot down. It was a heck of a lot of money. Their estimates and their guesstimates were outrageous. And the whole plan stunk.
Mr. Young, if I may
And
interrupt,
I believe
and we can
that the
have this
superintendent
conversation
deserved to have
continue
this
into the
moved.
second half.
Yes, sir, and I'll continue, but I believe it should have failed like it did. Thank you.
Representative Bello?
Good evening. I'm Amy Moore Bello, 311 Hartford Avenue. I'm here tonight to speak in opposition to the latest version of your flag policy. I do understand the need for a policy, it makes sense, but I really hope that you'll reconsider the restrictive one that you have before you tonight. I don't believe carving out specific flag exemptions makes great policy sense. However, your proposal tonight already has a carve-out with the POW MIA flag in it. So my hope is that you'll also include the pride flag and the flag of our sister city. I certainly wouldn't want to be the mayor when the delegation from Nagayo, Japan comes and you refuse to fly their flags. I think banning the pride flag is an ugly optic for the town. We've raised the pride flag the last 2 years. We've had the mayor, the town manager, other elected officials, we've had town staff, and we've had students come and take part in these flag raising ceremonies. We also raised the flag at the high school, and students had a positive reaction to it. Members of our LGBTQ plus community felt included in a world that is sometimes exclusive. We've seen hatred, we've seen violence towards our friends and family, not only in Connecticut, but across the country in the last couple of years. And I think it's a bad look for our community. It doesn't send the right message to our residents. Our town attorney and town manager worked on drafting a policy, and I hope that you'll reconsider that policy that sets certain parameters and allows council the authority and the opportunity to assess requests And, one of you would have to bring that request before your body. You'd have to vote on it after a discussion. And it would allow members to feel included in our community. Thank you for your time tonight. I hope you'll consider my suggestions, and I wish you all a happy holiday.
Thank you, Representative. And just a reminder for folks, I believe we had a public hearing on this matter at the last meeting. So the public hearing had been scheduled for that particular actionable item, but because of public comment, people can speak on any matters before them. But just a reminder for folks that are watching that there was a public hearing on that policy change at the last meeting. But because of public comment, people are free to speak on any issue that they wish to. So, yes, sir.
Jim Woodworth, 33 Mill Street, 5H. I came first of all to thank the Kathy Bagley and the Park and Rec Department and the Physical Services and the Police Department and anybody else who was involved, and the Chamber of Commerce for the wonderful holidays on Main. That was great. And also, in particular, all those residents and people who came by and enthusiastically accepted free vegetables from the Great Meadows Conservation Trust with donation to the Great Meadows Trust, which we collected $250 that night. It was worth the hour it took thawing out after, anyway, but, and that's all thanks to the Fairweather growers who grow an incredible bounty of vegetables in the Rocky Hill Meadows, but also in Weathersfield Meadows some. Every day in the harvest season, 2 full-size trailer trucks depart from the meadows full of vegetables to go to the market. Anyway, and also to Paul Borden and Linda Nielsen, Kathy Beatty, Great Meadows Trust people, and Cindy Greenblatt, a friend of the Keisha Farm, for going out and picking vegetables. And we went out and picked vegetables, and so many of them went away that night that we went back out, and they were still there. It's just amazing how much was out there until winter came, and it's all over now. But anyway, and therefore, it's time for the brisk winter walk starting on New Year's Day and continuing through February 5th, and you're all invited to join us. Great Meadows Conservation Trust. We visit various properties. One is in Rocky Hill, 2 are in Glastonbury. One starts in East Hartford but passes through that part of Weathersfield on the other side of the river. And February 5th is the full moon. We start at the Keeney Center, go down to see the sun setting over the Cove, and then out into the on the other side of under the highway and see the moon rising. So it's a cool event if weather cooperates. So hopefully you'll all put on the right clothes for whatever day it is and come and join us. And I also wanted to say that I look forward to Friends of Keisha Farm joining you in the report from the Land Use Survey, which I guess is going to happen next year. And hopefully there'll be some brisk winter walks to go with that, and listening to all what they have to say, and looking forward to that. So anyway, thanks a lot for all you guys do, and have a great holiday, everybody.
Thank you, Jim. Did anybody take that cabbage that you tried to push off on my wife and myself?
I'll tell you, they really did. I mean, I had some left over for the food pantry, food bank in Weathersfield, but then we went back out and I brought more. Paul Bourdain weighed one of his trips up to the St. Justin's in the North End, 300 pounds in the back of his truck. And that's just a drop in the bucket to what they produce. But Kathy Beatty goes to the House of Bread, and I think we had some for the loaves and fishes as well. So it's an amazing thing.
It is. Thank you, Jim.
You're welcome.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Lindsay Jones. I live at 216 Back Lane in Weathersfield. So I would like to comment on the flag policy. So my family has been going to Pride celebrations since my kids were babies. Many of our friends in the LGBTQ community had struggled to come out in high school and college. They had lost the support of their families. They'd often lost their jobs. This was the late 90s, early 2000s. And so the parades and the festivals were always a really good time for us. They felt important to us. They were important because we wanted to let our kids know from birth that we would love them, no matter if they were gay, straight, trans, cisgender, whatever, and we would support their friends as well. So over the years, our two children did come out as LGBTQ, which is like the least interesting thing about how wonderful they are. And we attended Pride over those years in Charleston, South Carolina, in Atlanta, DC, and even New York, and they were all really wonderful. But none were as special to us as the event we attended this past June, where my daughter Lucy, surrounded by family and friends, spoke about the importance of representation and protecting trans and queer children as the Pride flag was raised over the town hall of Weathersfield, the place that we call home. When you are the parent of an LGBTQ kid, you realize that representation truly does matter. Every year on the first day of school, my kids come home and report to me which teachers had rainbow flags in their rooms, and every year they make it their mission to add flags where they are missing, by offering to bring them to school, put them on teachers' walls, and explain to their teachers why it's important to have them there. They do this because they want to feel safe at school, they want their friends to feel safe, and they also want all the LGBTQ students at their school to stay alive. A study by the Trevor Project has shown that having even one supportive adult in the life of an LGBTQ+ kid reduces their risk of suicide by 40%. That's one supportive adult. Now imagine what it means to see your teachers, your school, and your town literally waving the flag of pride and acceptance for you. How special that would feel. And then imagine them taking the flag down quietly in cowardice to protect their money. I asked the town council today to be at least as brave as my kids and their friends.
Thank you. Ms. Cohen?
Hi, Deborah Cohen, 73 Church Street. Lindsay, you just took half of what I was going to say. But I did want to ask you all to think about the optics of making proclamations about how Weathersfield supports our LGBTQ community, and we raise the flag, and we have people come out in front of the high school for these flag raisings, and then somewhere, some way, in a town called Boston, the crazies come out and start lawsuits. And all of a sudden, Weathersfield is worried about some possible lawsuit at some point down the future, something that we have no reason to believe is going to happen. But and what the town is telling a portion of our community is, well, we supported you enough to say we want to do this publicly and visually. But again, as Lindsay said, we might lose money on it at some point, so maybe we don't support you. Because if you take that visual away, if you take your former statements away, you're taking your approval and your acceptance and your inclusion away. And I think that's a really bad thing for Weathersfield to do. I was also going to use the word cowardly. I've used it once or twice before on matters that came before council. Please do not be cowardly. If it's necessary, and I'm sorry that I missed the last meeting, if it's necessary to have a policy at all, and I can't believe we do over flags, perhaps it's possible to grandparent in the pride flag, because this is something to which you have made a commitment. And I don't think it's unreasonable to say to anybody who comes with a possible lawsuit in the future, this is a commitment that we made in good faith and we stand by it because we have values and because we're willing to take a chance and live those values. Okay? There was one other thing I was going to say, and I don't remember it because I'm nervous. This is a very personal issue to me. I have a dear one who spent decades coming to terms with who she is, and finally found the space and the ability and the community to go for it. And I want that dear one to know that our town is behind her all the way. So please, just, don't cower out. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, esteemed councilors. My name is Thomas Rowell. I live at 216 Back Lane. And I was in attendance this year at the pride flag raising right out there. To me, the highlight of that event was the sizable contingent that we had from Wethersfield High School, one of whom got up there right next to the politicians and gave an incredible speech. I'm sitting here thinking how proud I was to be living in a town that was doing the pride flag in the first place. I'm originally from South Carolina. When I was that age, we were arguing whether the Confederate flag should be flying over our state house. So it's a very different world up here. But that speech that she gave was not a victory lap. It was a pretty interesting and stark reminder that the kids are watching what we're doing. They're watching us with their eyes wide open, and they know what we're doing. They know about the Voting Rights Act being dismantled. They know about Roe versus Wade. They know about the Don't Say Gay laws. They know about the anti-trans hysteria that's out there. They know their rights are fragile because they can see them evaporating right in front of them. And I think the biggest thing that I want to leave you with is that these things seem symbolic, but they really matter. They really matter because these kids, these LGBTQ plus kids, they're living on a battlefield. And I have to be careful when I take my kids back to the place where I'm from. I have to watch my son like a hawk to make sure that he uses the bathroom that other people are expecting him to use, and that nothing bad would happen if he doesn't. This is not a situation where you can stand aside. What you're going to do tonight, if you take this draft law the way it is, you're not avoiding making a decision on this. You're taking a position on that battlefield. And the question is, which position do you guys want to take? What kind of town do you want this to be?
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Janice DeRoberts, 87 Meadowgate, and everyone who's come before me has said what they want to say about the flag so much better than I could, but I will just repeat the general message by saying last year's raising of the pride flag at Town Hall in honor of Pride Month was a wonderful event that personified the values of kindness, inclusion, and unity. It was an uplifting experience that inspired many of us to do better and be better. It was positive and heartfelt. The proposal to eliminate it is the opposite of uplifting and inspiring. In fact, at least to me, it feels like a betrayal of our LGBTQ neighbors, and a betrayal to what should be our community values of kindness, inclusion, and unity. I'm sorry, I didn't think I was going to get that upset. But just a reminder that people in the LGBTQ community that's not a profession, it's not a political affiliation, it's not a religion. To go backwards and stop doing this wonderful thing that we had done is just a terrible idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Brooke Landry, 362 Highland Street. I, as a sophomore at Wethersfield High School, have dedicated my time to protecting and spreading awareness of LGBTQ plus problems that we as LGBTQ plus students face. And I find it a little bit offensive that our flag policy prevents the awareness of LGBTQ plus students in our school, especially with the Club Q shootings and Pulse and, Don't Say Gay laws that have spread ripples of hate through this country. I find it heartbreaking that a town that I grew up in would suggest that we strip our allyship with the LGBTQ plus community for political safety.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Martha Keneally, 12 Fairmont Street. I am here to speak about the flag policy, but I do first just want to show some love for voice over IP. It will increase productivity. I can say on behalf, I am the chair of the library board. This is an important initiative for us. Our librarians spend an inordinate amount of time answering the phone saying, yes, the library is open, time that they should be spending serving the community. They are far too highly compensated and skilled to be answering that question. And so this is very important, and it will increase productivity. So I applaud the idea of moving forward with that. Conversely, I would like to, I am here standing in opposition to the very restrictive flag policy, and especially the removal of the pride flag. I can only echo and applaud the bravery of folks who've come to speak on this and their words. I have attended the pride flag raising for the past 2 years, and this lovely tradition that we have, and I would call it a tradition in our community now. It is a warm, bipartisan community event that celebrates inclusivity, that celebrates a unity within our community, just as that is exactly what the pride flag is symbolic of. And I am astonished that we would walk that back. I think it is a terrible message to send to our residents. I think it's a terrible message to send to folks who are thinking of moving to Wethersfield. I think it's a terrible message to send to our town employees, many of whom I know take this very personally. I think it's a terrible message to send to businesses that might want to come to Weathersfield. And I think it doesn't reflect who we are as a community. And I do think that the warm celebrations that we've had as we've gathered as a community around that flagpole do reflect what Weathersfield is all about. And so especially at a time when the LGBTQ plus community is literally being terrorized by the hostile environment and hate-filled violence that they are subjected to, I think it's really tone deaf for us to take a position like that. And so I would ask you to do what you can to create a policy that allows us to continue our wonderful tradition of raising the pride flag here in our town. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Lucy Jones, 216 Back Lane. I go to Weathersfield High School, and I am a member of the Weathersfield High School GSA. And this past summer, we had a flag raising ceremony where the pride flag was allowed to be flown in front of Town Hall. Raising the pride flag here at the Weathersfield Town Hall sent a feeling of safety throughout the town. Pride flags and other flags that symbolize particular communities and organizations should be allowed to fly freely at the discretion of the board. By only allowing the American flag, state flag, and Weathersfield flag on government-controlled lands, we are restricting the voices of this town and ignoring everything we have worked for as Americans. America was built on different ethnicities and groups coming together, so why shouldn't these groups be able to feel represented by their towns? The pride flag in particular is a flag that holds a special place in the community. A large population of our town and schools identify as LGBTQ+, and by banning the flying of the flag, we are taking away a crucial piece of representation for these people. And an already hurting community, why would Weathersfield attempt to make things worse? This June, our town promised that the Weathersfield High School GSA would be protected, that we wouldn't end up with don't say gay bills, that we wouldn't follow this route of homophobia so much of our country has gone down. By restricting flag use, we are taking a giant step back from equality and acceptance and a giant step towards controlled speech and exclusion. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Elizabeth?
Hello, I'm Elizabeth Keys, 119 Dix Road. I will be brief. I apologize for missing the public hearing a couple weeks ago. My 7-year-old had one of his many activities, so I apologize, but I just wanted to echo the sentiments that we've heard already tonight in support of continuing to fly the pride flag. I am an attorney, so I certainly understand the desire to be litigation averse. But I think the town manager and the town attorney drafted a very thoughtful policy, and I hope that as the deliberations on this continue, we hope to find a way to continue to fly the pride flag and have these celebrations, because I think, as we've heard here tonight, to many of us it might be just a flag, but it's certainly very important to members of our community who have already spoken here so eloquently, and I would just like to offer my support for them, and hope we can continue to have this celebration of love and diversity in our town. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Seeing none, we'll move on to council reports. Any counselors with any reports from boards or commissions? Councilman Pentelow.
Yeah, I just have a quick one. I'll have a more comprehensive one probably next meeting, but just from EDIC and RDA. Many of you probably read the paper that Doral Market, Dorian, who owns Treva, Aver, Zohara, as well as Doral Market, just signed a lease with Chips, and I think that the old Chips building, and I definitely think that's a testament to Joy's work, who's here in the crowd, as well as Fred's and some of the programs that we utilized from the ARPA dollars. The other thing that I want just to make note of is the fireworks. Fred, I'm sorry if I'm stealing your thunder on that, but we did get a private, call it a private donation from a building owner in town that offered to foot the bill for the fireworks display so we can have them again for this 4th of July celebration. So I figured that was a big deal. We certainly say thank you to him, but I think he wishes to remain anonymous at this time. So that concludes my report, Mayor.
Thank you. Sounds promising. Looking forward to it. Any other? Councilman Lesser?
Thank you, Mayor. I have two. One is I attended the breakfast of the Weathersfield Advisory Committee for People with Disabilities that they had for a group home and the therapeutic centers. I was serving pancakes, probably not too well at it, but it was extremely well attended. Santa was there, and there were hundreds of people that came, at least a couple hundred, and the community came out and support was terrific. And secondly, and a lot of it's on the agenda, so I'll be really brief, I attended the Parks and Rec Board meeting last Thursday night, the 15th, and I know we're going to be talking about the Community Investment Fund. We had a lot of discussion about that, which is on our agenda, and the dock, which is on our agenda tonight as well. And the only other thing I'll mention, it was at the Solomon Wells House, which we try to do once a year, and we got to hear from the curator, which was interesting and helpful and informative. But all in all, the Solomon Wells House is in pretty good shape and is a kind of a beautiful house in Weathersfield that the community gets to enjoy. So thanks to Kathy and the work of the Parks and Rec Board, but a lot of it's on our agenda. So that's it, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councilman Forrest?
Thanks, Mayor. Deputy Mayor and I have been meeting quite frequently now with the town manager on, I guess, what we could sort of call the Big Ideas Committee, but the real transformative ideas that will hopefully really transform the town and our budget and our tax, understanding of taxes. And we are, for a pun, digesting some really, really big ideas that are very complex. From the endowment to the RFP, which is now out for electrification of our town. Four proposals. I can provide them to you all. Okay. To the way in which we collect our municipal waste and possible anaerobic digestion, which ended up to be where our two great big ideas started to merge together, and the real possibility of taking our solid food waste and actually transforming it into electricity in a very, not in like a little electric way, in a very meaningful electric way. And the amount of actual food waste which is used throughout the region, to really understanding that our town is taking it on the chin as it relates to getting the pilot reimbursement from the state. So these are the items that we're tackling. They're heavy, lots of reading. We're getting through it sort of one at a time, and sometimes they even merge together with the electrification and the anaerobic digestion and getting rid of actually a portion of our waste stream in order to not pay the amount of tipping fees, and possibly even use that alternate use of that waste stream in a positive manner within our town. But it's going to take, I think, many more meetings for us to sort of work through something that is workable for this town and may even involve other towns and the collaboration of other towns. But sometimes solving difficult problems and transforming takes time and a lot of effort and cooperation. So thanks for the council for creating the committee and working with us as we sort of work on some of these big issues. And hopefully, I'd say within the next 3, 4, 5, 6 months can come to the council with at least a setup of some ideas about how we might be able to move forward and transform our town for the better. Hopefully that was on point, Deputy Mayor.
Well spoken. Better than I could have done.
Mayor, can I just ask him a quick question? Have you reached out, for the anaerobic digesters, have you reached out to Quantum Biopower? They're down in Southington?
Yes, we are looking into their setup specifically. Yep.
Yeah, I know the owner pretty well, so if you want a tour, I could definitely, we'll take it offline and we can arrange something.
Absolutely, and I thank you for that, Pat,
Yeah.
Councilor Pentelau. But yes, and they're one of a few.
Yeah, they're great.
But it's, I think as we dug into it, it was much more successful than I think I initially had thought. And
Absolutely.
that's, thank you for that offer.
You got it, man.
Thank you, Councilman. And who would have thought just a couple months ago when we put the two of you together? And I'll say I did, because I know you are interested in electrification of this town, and the deputy mayor's interest in
Garbage.
removal of organics to reduce our tipping fees with the MSW, that some productive work would come out of this.
I like to keep a little humor going, so the town manager's been inundating us with a lot of reading material, and my pun last week was, I haven't had time to read all this garbage that you sent me.
But I will put a plug in for the tipping, or the NIP funding. So I think I've mentioned this before. We do receive some funding from the state, not much, about $26,000. This is the 5 cents per bottle that goes towards it. And I will advocate that a portion, if not all of it, goes to litter cleanup. I see Kathy Bagley back there. I know we do a lot of nature cleanups, park cleanups. Volunteers come to help clean up some of our town property. I've expressed concerns about some of the litter to Sally Katz, our Director of Fiscal Services. So if in your deliberations talk of that state revenue that comes into the to the municipalities, if we can do that to help beautify Weathersfield, I would appreciate it.
Thanks, Mayor, will do.
Anything else? No others? Okay, general comments from the council? Councilwoman Carbone?
Thank you. So on Wednesday, December 7th, the Board of Education and the town council members were invited to attend a meeting at the High Crest School. This was not a town-sanctioned meeting. It was by the elementary, and I'm using air quotes because it actually was a quote, elementary school parent community group. It's a group of dedicated parents looking for a path forward in regards to updating of our schools after the referendum had failed in November. We all know that our schools need attention. And I said in the past, unfortunately, I do believe that that proposal wasn't packaged appropriately. I'm hopeful that based on the response to that proposal, that the BOE will go back to the drawing board and revise or devise a plan that all our residents can get behind. I know myself would welcome the opportunity to offer any input if the BOE would be willing to allow us to be more involved in the planning stages, because I believe the transparency as well as a detailed process of the proposed plan would be very well received. But I just want to thank those women for all their work, and it was great seeing everybody there. There's a lot of work we need to do to get there, and I know we're all willing to pitch in and do what we've got to do. But I really hope that we can keep moving forward with that, because we all know we have to do something, but whatever that is, hopefully we can be included in that plan. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councilman Biggs?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to just say a few items about the flag policy. I know we are going to speak about it later. So I missed 2 of the meetings when my wife and I were going through some things. So I did kind of catch up to the flag policy a little late. I will say that I personally believe the original policy that was put forth, I think that one, it leaves room for us to be council members and leaders of the town to make decisions as they come up. Whereas I do understand the concerns of possible lawsuits and et cetera, I kind of think that when we go in that narrow, very restricted realm, we do kind of close a specific part of our community that feels like they want and are able to reach out to us. Whereas we will say, hey, you know, the American flag represents all. The town flag represents all. Some people may not feel that way. And I think that if we do this restricted policy, we kind of shut down that door to the community that really depends and relies on us. And that's just personally how I feel. I wanted to put that out there before we got into the whole conversation of the policy later on in the meeting. But that is where I stand with this. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Well, Mr. Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I wanted to speak a little bit about the Cove in general, and I don't know if we should tie that into the docks conversation, or I just want to toss it out there that we've had numerous discussions about improving the looks of the Cove. I particularly have a problem with the Jersey barriers. I think they're awful, and I'm disappointed that they haven't been removed so far. We're heading into a winter season. I see no reason why we can't move those right now and get them out of there and move forward with our proposal of putting an island or whatever it comes out with next year. It just gives the wrong impression when you drive down there that, you know, we have this beautiful body of water and we look at these concrete Jersey barriers with paint on them, and I mean, we couldn't even get new ones there. And so I don't know how to get that conversation started again. Like I say, we've had plenty of discussions about it. I think something needs to be done, and I'd like to see some way of moving that forward, whatever it may turn into. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing none, just wanted to kind of provide a uplifting story. I was invited to a reception honoring one of the residents of a group home here in Wethersfield. As many of you know, we have a number of group homes, a number of residents that are served by these group homes. An incident occurred a couple months back where the caregiver of one of the gentlemen that was living in the group home had a medical emergency at one of our restaurants, and without pausing, that gentleman called 911, and assistance from the town came almost immediately. He also went into this restaurant, got help for his caregiver, stayed with her until the ambulance arrived, and is a real, hero for not only that particular caregiver but her family. They wanted to honor him, so they invited me to come on down to an event that was hosted just south of us, not in Wethersfield, but in Rocky Hill at one of their facilities down there. And since then, I've kept in conversations with the group home, and they are planning additional parties and outreach for not only the members of the public, but for us here on council to go and meet with the staff and the residents. But it was just a great reception kind of to end of the year, and look forward to the holidays, hearing that story and knowing that there is some good that comes out of a lot of tragic situations, especially here in town. So I just wanted to mention that for everybody tonight. Not seeing any more. Mr. Town Manager.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Just briefly, as you all know, you have your appointments to boards and commissions. There are a few boards and commissions that I have the appointment authority over per the charter. One is the Economic Development and Improvement Commission. I did make 3 appointments. One was moving Anthony Martino from an alternate member to the vacancy of a regular member. The next 2 were filling the 2 alternate positions for that commission, and those are Anna Laurie, who's a local realtor, executive chef, and business owner, and also Wesley Brulick, who many of you may know from Times Full Company, also an area professor. So those 2 will be joining the EDIC. In addition to the RDA, Bryce Hardy will be joining that group as a regular member. So I just want to make you aware of those appointments. Next, I would just like to make a comment in updating for the item that's under bids for the CROG unleaded fuel pricing. One of the reasons why you don't see a price in the packet materials is because we don't have it when we go through this process. Every year, I guess, is a regular recurring thing. I'm new to it myself. But CROG works with local fuel distributors to get pricing for the next year, and they hold out as long as they can to the end of the year to provide that pricing so that the market doesn't catch them off guard. We did receive those prices, and the low bid was Burke Oil at $2.36 a gallon, with a mark of about 5 cents. The next closest bid was Dime Oil, and that came in at $2.61 per gallon with a 20-cent markup. So we are going with the low bid on that. And so this resolution that you will be voting on later, and it's under the consent agenda, will authorize me to sign that agreement for that low bid to Burke Oil. And then next, another positive thing. I was able to attend an event over at the Senior Center for Tech Help for Seniors. They did a plaque dedication for Catherine Gorskowski, who is a very active volunteer with Tech Help for Seniors. They do a lot of great work with our seniors here, teaching them, the tools that are out there today that many of them do not have comfort with utilizing. iPads, iPhones, cell phones, enables them to stay in contact with their family members and do things with, deal with the government and, apply for things and do all those things that they should do. So it's been a great resource for our seniors. Catherine unfortunately passed away, but her family saw fit to make a donation on her behalf to the Senior Center, and so they purchased 2 large video screens that they're informational screens. As you go into the community center now at either entrance, you'll see one of those large screens that tell you where to go, what's going on, all the events. It was a really nice ceremony. Catherine's family was present, and they were very appreciative. And I just wanted to thank everyone down there for all their work, all the volunteers, the work that they do there. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Sue?
The majority of our historic document grant project has been completed, and that includes the scanning of 1,400 maps and the recreating of 12 of our older land records volumes. And so that was a good project coming to an end.
Thank you. Just a question for the town manager. Because we have Burke Oil's price, do we need to discuss that at all? And if we do, shall we move that off of the consent agenda and move it up to bids?
It's certainly up to you if you'd like to do that. We could do that. There's no issue with moving that.
Let me just take the temperature of the members up here. You guys had all heard Burke Oil had come in at the lowest price. Now that we have that, does anybody have any, concern if we keep it on the agenda, consent agenda, or move it to bid?
It is on consent, yeah. You can leave it on consent.
Okay. Thank you. We'll keep it on the consent agenda. Okay, bids. This is for the VoIP telephone. We had heard some discussion about it earlier from the public. And I know we have staff here. Mike, are you going to present on this item?
Good evening, Mike O'Neill, Finance Director. I'm here with John Eichner, who's our telecommunications and radio consultant, and Jim DeRegan from the Board of Ed, who's a network manager there and provides quite a bit of assistance to us on the town side under our shared services agreement. Both of these gentlemen and Derek Sola were very involved in getting us to this point on this project. I'll just give you a quick overview of the process that we went through to get to this point, and these gentlemen can answer any technical questions that you might have. My office issued requests for proposals almost a year ago, actually in January, And we received 10 proposals as a result of that. We then formed a selection committee, which was the staff here, to review all of those. And step one was to identify a system. And then step two would be to identify the vendor, the implementer of that system. So we identified 3 systems that we were interested in, brand name systems, Avaya, Cisco, and Mitel. And there was 1 vendor offering Avaya, 1 for Cisco, and 3 vendors offering Mitel systems. We had all 5 vendors come in and give us a presentation here, demonstrated their equipment. It was pretty protracted over 2+ days. A lot of questions and just a lot of detail. They were very productive. After that, it was decided that Mitel was the best system to go with. It was really the most, it's a very robust system, but it was the most low cost of the 3. It's a system that the Board of Ed is using now, which we thought is important in terms of administration of the system and being familiar with that. So we did some follow-up inquiry with the 3 vendors that were offering the Mitel systems, and our recommendation to the council is to select Connecticut Communications, which is a local company here in Durham, based in Durham. They do work for the town of Windsor, town of Newington, town of Glastonbury, quite a few local towns. They're familiar with the environment. They've been in business for 47 years. They're a platinum partner with Mitel. Just did overall a very good job for us. So there's really two things that we're asking for this evening, or that we're recommending that the council take action on. One is award of a contract to Connecticut Communications for $250,412. That's all the equipment, software licensing, support, et cetera. And then a contract for $75,000, which is a 5-year contract for the public telephone network trunking, which is the interface that would get the system to access the public telephone system. And that's Edge Communications is a separate vendor that provides that trunking. So it'd be 2 separate contracts.
Okay. Any questions for Mike? Councilman Hill.
Thanks, Mayor. Mike, and I apologize if you don't know, you might not know the answers, but could you just elaborate more on what trunking, what it is? Because I'm unfamiliar with it, and due to the price of it.
It's the thing you plug into. No, John can explain it all for you. I can't. I mean, I know conceptually very little.
Essentially, there's 3 types of trunks. A regular analog trunk line, a dial line that you plug in, a port in the system. Then there's something that was probably 50 years ago. Then about 30 years ago came along what they call PRIs, primary rate interface. That's a 23-channel bundled trunk that comes into your system. We have one of those today serving our old system. And in the last 20 years or so, with the advent of VoIP communications, the industry has come up with something called SIP trunking, Session Initiation Protocol is what it stands for. And basically SIP trunking is digital trunking. It's packets of information. It's not an analog stream, it's just voice packets. And a SIP trunk you can size from 1 to whatever. You know, you're not dedicated or limited to a 23-channel PRI. You size it for what you need. So that's what we're engaging here, is SIP trunking. Now, we will keep the PRI trunking for our fax lines until it's determined that the faxing can do well over SIP trunking. At this point, we haven't been convinced of that, but does that answer your question about trunking?
No, it does. I appreciate it. And then for this particular contract, this is for a 5-year for this
Yeah, I believe so, yeah. One thing we've done with this system is designed it to be as redundant as possible. We will have two servers, two essential entry points. Well, one will be located here in the town hall, the other one in the police department. We're also providing dual trunking. So if we lose trunking to town hall, it'll be picked up seamlessly by the other entry point. So we'll have all the equipment and the facilities coming into the PD to serve the entire town. We don't have that today. So that's one of the key differences in this new system. A couple others is we're bringing the library in. Library was sent off on their own when the building renovations were done 15, 20 years ago, whenever that was. We'll bring the library back in. We're adding overhead paging in town hall as an ancillary service. They have that down at the town garage now. We want to see it here in town hall for emergency paging. So we will be paging over the phone instruments and over speakers in the ceiling to hit the corridors, the restrooms, places where we won't have phones. Those are some of the highlights of what we came up with.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Councilman Lesser?
Thank you, Mayor. I have one question and for you, and I think one for the town manager. So I understand this is to update and modernize our system. Is this going to be comparable what other nearby towns are? I assume we're behind what most of our fellow towns have and significantly behind. Is that correct?
Yes. This system has not had a software upgrade since 1992. We had an issue with a power outage probably 4 or 5 years ago where, unfortunately, it happened over 4th of July weekend, so we had some time to get it fixed. I guess it was bad timing, but at least we had a weekend where we couldn't get parts. We had to just about buy used parts on eBay. So we've got a system that's 30 to 40 years old. It's still running, but we can't get replacement parts at this point.
Understood. Plan to support that. And then this question's through the town manager. Since this is off budget, I think the recommendation is to use ARPA funds. Is that correct? Or how are we going to, or maybe that's for the finance director, in terms of where the funds are proposed to come from?
You've already appropriated these funds from ARPA.
From ARPA.
From
We
the
already
first
decided.
round, yep. That was decided a while.
350,000.
In this amount for this specifically?
It was for
350,000 was allocated from the ARPA funds.
Okay. Apologize for not remembering that. Thank you.
Mr. Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, thanks. This is same company that the Board of Ed uses. Is it the same equipment?
It's the same equipment, not the same company.
Okay.
It's a Mitel hardware. Is DBO?
Yeah, Digital Back Office.
Okay, Digital Back Office is the company that supports the phone system at the schools. That's a cloud-based system. This would be what's called a premise-based system. John described the two servers. Digital Back Office is the same company that we use to support the fiber optic network between the town buildings.
So they're not really compatible. They'll be two separate systems.
No, they would be administered the same way.
Is there a reason why we don't have one system for all the buildings in town? And I notice on here, you have the high school on here, which is the only school listed. Maybe you could kind of, I'm trying to understand if there would have been any savings to having one company do all the work and, one phone bill, if you will, for the trunks and that kind of thing.
As Mike said, the Board of Ed system is cloud-based. We determined that we did not want a cloud-based system. We wanted a premise-based. We wanted to own our own equipment and service it here. It is the same system. It'll be administered the same way. The reason you see the high school there is we have a fiber drop off the town's network in the high school. So we want to place at least a phone or two in the server room at the high school. We are looking at ways to connect the two systems. It wasn't part of this bid, or the RFP, but because we did end up with basically the same system, we're talking to both DBO and Connecticut communications about ways to get linked trunking so we can have access, from one system to the other without having to dial 9 and go out. So we're looking at that. It wasn't part of the original proposal, but there is a possibility we can work on that and get that.
Am I
Accept that.
understanding what you're saying, that you have some capability at the high school, like if their system went down, they would be able to use
No,
a
no.
few lines?
No, we just, there is a node, a drop off the town's network in the server room at the high school. That's the only place, and it's not really doing anything. It's there for data backup right now and, be able to transfer files back and forth. But because it's there, we said, excuse me, we said, hey, let's put a phone or two in that server room. That's not going to help them if they have an outage, really.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So, now, to the 5-year plan, we own the system. We own the hardware, we own the phones, everything that goes with it.
Everything, yep. And the 250,000 is 5 years of software licensing and 5 years of support.
Okay.
Premium maintenance.
So the 250,000 is just for 5 years. Does it include the purchase of the equipment?
It does,
Okay.
yes. We own everything.
Yep.
Yep.
With this. Okay. And then I think one of the other gentlemen had mentioned it earlier, and then John had reiterated that, the system that we have is 30-plus years old. And I think the entire time I've been on this council, Mike, you've placed it on, and maybe John had placed it on either CIP, one of the tranches of funds to pay for this. And having talked with the library over the years and, what their needs were, number one, number two, for the last 2 or 3 years has always been VoIP phones. And I think for at least the first 6 years on council, we had never gotten to this point where we could, allocate funding for this. I'm glad that we not only have, the ARPA funds to be able to do it, but to put this as a priority for us. I did hear comments earlier about productivity of staff. We might not be able to, let staff go, but, overtime costs, the back and forth of having to track people down, messages, it's more productive during the day for them as staff to be able to focus on other work rather than, messages and all that. So, and then to Councilor Lesser's point, we are behind the times. My job, I'm calling municipalities every day on various, and then you just hit the prompts, you get right to where you have to be. There's no leaving a voicemail, there's no missed calls or anything like that. You get directly to the department that you want to get to. So kudos to the work that you guys have been doing for almost not only on this for about a year, but for the last 10 years trying to get us to this point. I think it would be a great asset to our town staff, but more importantly to the public who are trying to reach their respective departments. So.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick question, Mike. What is the maintenance after the 5 years?
Good question. So the annual cost, so there's 3 components. One is the SIP trunking, which is the $75,000, is 5 years, so that's $15,000 a year. It'll be something on that order in year 6, right? We don't know exactly what it would be. And then also included in the $250,000 is an annual software licensing of $16,000, and then the support, CT Communications, the implementer, of $8,000 a year. So those 3 combined are $40,000
And so that's roughly what we're looking at.
in year 6.
Right.
Yep.
And that's it, because we own the equipment, so it's just the maintenance stuff.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Actually, I just have one quick follow-up. You had mentioned Wyndham and Glastonbury, and maybe one other town had worked with Connecticut Communications. Have we and I see Jim nodding his head, have we done our due diligence and contacted various?
We have. Yeah, does John have the?
In writing.
Yep. Okay. Okay. Great. Thank you, John. Sure. Oh, you have a question?
Yeah, maybe I misunderstood. So you said there's 3 companies that offer the Mitel. Does that mean that they offer services as well? Is that something, I'm just saying, year 6,
Yes.
you can go out to bid maybe for that and see who offers us?
Yes.
We could do that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. This is 5 years. It's a 5-year contract. And we would do that. We do that for the fiber optic network. We sat down and started from scratch and interviewed several firms to provide that support. And we're in a 7-year contract for that right now.
Okay, thank you.
See no other questions or comments?
I'll make a motion to award the bid for the purchase of a VoIP telephone system, licensing, maintenance, support, and installation to Connecticut Communications in the amount of $250,412, and public telephone network trunking bid award to Edge Communications Solutions in the amount of $75,000.
Second.
Further discussion? Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen. Good luck with this, and glad to see it's being implemented.
We are also.
And I saw Kathy here earlier. Next, bids for the approval of funds for dock improvements at Cove Park.
Good evening, Kathy Bagley, Director of Parks and Recreation and Social and Youth Services. I'm here this evening to discuss the Cove dock. That's the closest to the channel down at the Cove. That dock, over this past summer, we had put that new dock in. And what we found out over the summer is that when we had what I referenced as minor flooding or high water at the Cove, the ramp that takes you from ground level to the dock would be submerged and not usable to people that either wanted to fish or go out and just sit on the dock, or also launch their boat and tie up there. So due to that, we had a request, and we also looked at that and realized that the company does offer a longer ramp that would allow it to be above water. So we are here tonight to ask for that to be approved, along with when we had originally put in the new dock there, we had just put it in as a straight line. And there were many requests to make what I consider a T. So we borrowed some of the high water docks that were extensions for the main dock and took 3 of those docks and created the T, and that worked out really well. We really need those docks should there be high water in the Cove for people to access the main dock. So what we're looking to do is to buy 3 dock extensions also. So that's the proposal that's here for council tonight.
Thank you, Kathy. Councilman Biggs?
Thank you, Mayor. Just questions about the just general design. I know this has been implemented for some years before I was on council, but my email box is flooded, as all of yours are, about the dock and the issues. Is just adding this extension going to really resolve the issues that are continuous in that area? The 3 extensions, I understand there's some parts that get flooded and we want to extend to avoid that. Like, has the full design of that area and where everything is placed been reviewed before saying these 3 extensions are where we should go with?
The 3 extensions are to make the T. The ramp itself, the 30-foot ramp, will bring that ramp from the dock out onto the ground to a higher elevation, so that the minor flooding that we experience out there will be underneath that ramp, because we'll be a little higher.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Carbone?
Hi, Kathy, how are you?
Good, thanks.
Shelley, can I just ask you to?
Yeah, sorry.
You can pull it closer.
So, when we had discussed the dock initially this summer, and we had discussed pulling that piece away from the boating dock, if you will, the original where the boats tie up. When we were there, and it's been a while since I've been there, so I apologize, that piece that we talked about moving and that you ended up moving, wasn't that piece redundant? Like, wasn't that, there was 2 dock width, that one piece that you had moved was not being utilized for the flooding? Is that correct?
Well, should there be the major flooding, that all of those pieces that were attached to the main dock would be used to get all the way to the foot of the little bank.
Okay, so right now, we don't have any of the extra dockage attached to where the boats launch, or the boats are tied up, the actual boat dock. I'm getting the wordage confused.
Yeah, I think I understand. The one that's doubled up.
Yes, yes.
That piece really is the high extension dock.
And we don't have any of that right now? Any of that double dock? That's not there now, in position, attached to that piece?
We took 3 of those docks and made the T over on the other one.
Got it. So right now, okay, I see what you're saying. And then the ramp that is going to be going from the parking lot to the dock, the fishing dock or whatever you want to call it, is that just kind of the same thing that you have there now, just extended? It's what material is that made out of?
It's similar to the docks itself. I'm going to get it, they have a scientific term, it's a polyethylene kind of material.
Essentially like a plastic, right?
Yeah, plastic would be a better word.
So it's essentially the same thing, just an extended version that's going to go into the parking lot?
Correct, yes.
So the docks will stay exactly where they are?
Yes.
Just the ramp will be different?
Just the ramp will be longer.
Okay. All right, thank you. Yeah, I was trying to figure out how that worked, but can I have a different, unrelated question to the dock? Are you, is physical services or Park and Rec responsible for the maintenance of the Cove?
Physical services is responsible for maintenance.
Okay. So for like garbage, that's physical services. What about something that happens on the dock, at the dock, that's still physical services, nothing to do with you?
Well, it depends on what it is. I mean, we work together. So if things are reported or anything like that, we work together to correct whatever it might be.
Okay, I was just curious. And then also, and I'm sorry to take up so much of your time, there's been some issues with the signage, and we've talked about this. I know this comes up quite a bit about whether it's a fishing dock or it's not. And I went back in some of the pictures and some of the, whatever things I could find up in my emails from way back about the Cove, and it was never actually called a fishing dock. Is that truly a fishing dock, or are people allowed to tie up their boats there or anything like that?
It is a fishing dock, the one closest to the channel.
Okay. Exclusive or no? Does it matter?
We haven't made it exclusive.
Okay, so right now, it's not an exclusive fishing dock?
Correct.
Okay, all right. I just want to be very clear on that, because, we get some questions, and I want to... Now, who makes that determination, just out of curiosity for that, too?
Well, we would have that, it would start with our department, and we would talk with the park board as far as a recommendation.
Okay.
So that's how it would start.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mr. Deputy Mayor?
A couple more. So, as someone alluded to, our inboxes, our mailbox is full. Is this dock going to be anchored properly to, now it's going to be more inboard, if you will, inland? Is there a different anchoring system?
For the ramp?
Yes.
For the ramp?
To hold the whole dock in place?
Well, the ramp isn't going to hold the dock in place. The dock is anchored by itself.
And is that proper? Do we know if
It was installed by the company.
Okay. There's been discussions about when it's high water, it's not going to be held in place. I don't know, just relaying the information, so.
It's,
I mean, it's a floating dock,
the
right?
dock is a floating dock.
So I got the impression that the pipes that it floats up on are bent or damaged or too short.
We're gonna ask when the contractor comes down, should this be approved, we're gonna have them look at it.
Great, great. The other, I wanted to expand a little bit on what Counselor Carbone was talking about. I just want to understand how it works. Let's say the trash cans, they're below the high water mark. You know, when the water comes up and the garbage floats out. Is it Parks and Rec responsibility to notify physical services, hey, it's time to move things up to high ground, you know, the ticket booth, you know, shack, toilets, so on. I mean, how does that work? I mean, there's a lot of, what I see is a lot of finger pointing going on with, you know, people that are commenting to us, you know, about so-and-so should have done this, or I just don't, I'm trying to understand how it's supposed to work so that I could respond appropriately.
Both departments work together to keep an eye on the river and the flooding capacity of it. And so whoever figures it out first, we both have access to the online information that comes out that is always posted about the river conditions. Sometimes stuff happens, and it happens so quickly, it will happen, that neither one has the opportunity to see it. The police watch out for it, physical services, Parks and Rec, and we try to, whoever thinks it's going to happen first, a call is made, whether it's weekend, during the week. We keep an eye, believe it or not, on Massachusetts and New Hampshire for the water and what's going on up there with the snow melt. There's a lot that goes into it to try and predict, and sometimes you just can't predict the river. I've been here long enough to know that as best a job as we can do, it still messes us up. Because sometimes you don't even know if they open a dam up above us, we don't hear about it, and that may do it. So there's a lot that goes into it, and we give it our best experience to try and figure it out. And do we mess up sometimes? Yeah, but that's the river.
Thanks for clearing it up. Thank you.
Unfortunately.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry. We were talking about the Cove, one of my favorite things, so I'm sorry.
It's our favorite, too.
I know. So wasn't there an architect that was working on a plan to readdress some of the issues at the Cove? Whatever happened with that? What's happening with
Are you
it?
talking about the island that's going to replace the Jersey barriers? Yes. He's been working on it. It's been pro bono, so we've been working with him, and we've got one other piece to finish with the design that has to do with the, when you're working in a floodplain, you have to, whatever you're choosing to do that's going to, if we're looking to raise something, we have to lower something somewhere else within that same area for the flooding capacity. And that's our last piece that we have to get the right numbers for. And once we get those numbers, which I expect we should have that soon, then we start the review process with the boards and commissions.
All right. We look forward to that.
Yes, we're with you there. We want to get it done, too.
Thank you.
No other questions or comments? Just, and it's not directed directly at you, just because you are here, so I'll mention it to both Sally Katz and Derek Greger, is that when that plan does come about, at least a good portion of Main Street as it leads into the Cove be repaved.
Oh, okay.
I don't know how many times I've, bit my tongue cursing over those bumps when I'm bringing either a trailer out of there or, just simply driving on it. The potholes, and I can only imagine what the neighbors must hear of that trailer just bouncing on those potholes. So just so that you know from the Parks and
sure.
Rec Board perspective that I don't know if anybody else agrees with me on this, but I will definitely be mentioning it to Derek for possible engineering, as well as Sally Katz with some of the quick fixes that we can do in the time being. But, long-term, if we can do something with engineering to get repavement down there would be
Yeah, no, I can definitely pass it on to Derek. He's been a big help with this design. He's
Yeah.
been working directly with the architect, so.
And the crosswalks have helped as well on Main Street as you get towards the Cove entrance. Councilman Lesser?
Thank you, Mayor. If I can, just to put it on the table, I'm going to make a motion to approve spending $18,233.72 from the Cove Park Preservation Fund for improvements to Cove Park.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Ayes have it, motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kathy. Moving on to the consent agenda. It's in our packets. I didn't see any resignations from boards and commissions, but correct me if I'm wrong. There are some appointments, which Design Review Advisory Committee, in yours, we don't have to put on there. They're discretion of the town manager, as you had mentioned earlier. And thank you for the updated price from Burke Oil. And then minutes, I know.
Discussed it last time. Just go ahead and put them on, even though not all the members were present, so.
Okay. Everybody's comfortable with that? Okay.
Motion to approve.
Well, we could add more things to this consent agenda. Not hearing any, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as noted in our packet.
Second.
All those, yeah, you seconded? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Consent agenda is adopted. Approval of ordinances and resolutions, we did not have any of them with us tonight. Unfinished business to the flag policy, and we had heard some discussion on this tonight, and we have heard discussion from this body on this at the last meeting. So moving on to that item. Mr. Town Manager, would you want to just remind the council why we're hearing this item tonight and some background on it?
Sure. So this comes before you all. This was originally proposed due to, as was mentioned by some of the public comment, due to a Supreme Court decision against the city of Boston because of their refusal to fly the Christian flag. It was taken to the Supreme Court as a violation of free speech, and the Supreme Court found against the city of Boston, and their primary reasoning for finding against the city was that they had no policy, and they had allowed other flags before and had no policies prohibiting this particular flag. Therefore, they had to allow any flags as a matter of free speech, that they were violating this organization's free speech rights by refusing to fly that flag. In consultation with the town attorney, he suggested that it would be smart for the town to adopt a policy as to which flags can or cannot be flown. In our conversation, we initially talked about providing a more flexible approach to this, given some of the activities we've seen in other towns that have taken this up before we have, and specifically a lot of issues around the pride flag. So what the county attorney had outlined for you all is a proposal that does strictly prohibit certain flags, and those would be flags that are considered religious for a particular religious movement or creed, flags of a political party, flags advocating a certain outcome in an election, flags of commercial organizations, and then flags that are symbolic of actions of violence, discrimination, prejudice, racism. Other than that, it gave the council the ability to hear proposals from other council members to fly certain flags for a restricted period of time. It could not be indefinitely for the entire year. It would be limited to 30 days, and but in general, it would be a customary duration of about 7 days. So that's what was proposed in previous conversations here with this council. The direction that I had received was that that at the time, the overall opinion was to go with a more restrictive version, which some of the towns, again, have adopted across the country. And that version would limit the flags that could be flown to the U.S. flag, the state of Connecticut flag, the town of Wethersfield flag, and we also added, as part of those conversations, the POW-MIA flag. So that's where we're at right now. So we removed the process of making the more flexible option. We added the POW-MIA flag. I also included some language that some other localities here in Connecticut chose to have, that expressly stated that the flagpoles owned are maintained by the town, are not intended to serve as a forum for free expression by the public, but rather as a non-public forum for the display of the flags authorized herein as government speech. And again, the ones that had the more restricted policy adopted language similar to that. So I put that in there as an edit based upon the conversation we had last. But of course, nothing's been adopted yet, and we are still at ground zero looking for guidance. I will suggest that it is important that we do adopt a policy. Again, this is the recommendation of the town attorney, but I would also say that we have had requests that are pending the results of this policy. I've been telling people I can't make any decision on any flags to be flown other than what's up there until the policy conversation is completed at the council. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Councilman Biggs?
Thank you, Mayor. As far as the town attorney, with it, like I said, I missed the initial conversation piece going on around this. But the original draft that came out, that wasn't restricted, and then this one that is, what was the town attorney's sway on that one?
He basically said you can go one of two ways. You can go a restrictive way that very clearly delineates which flags can be flown, calls them out, or you can go for a more flexible version, which he feels is just as defensible if we were to deny any flags that fall within these prohibitions. He said either way, he thinks will be protected from a legal standpoint. He said it's really up to the council to decide which way is their preference.
Okay. So one of my concerns, and this is coming from your military guy, is that an argument may be that not everyone is affiliated with the POW flag. And how does that one get it? I understand why that would be a flag we'd want to fly. But for those that don't have the same affiliation or connection that I have or some of us have here, may be in lack of disagreement to that flag being selected out of, a multitude of other flags. Or the fact that, for the last several years, we've flown the pride flag and supported the pride, support and been there for the community, and now we step back. I am not a lawyer and I don't ever want to become one. But from that standpoint, I wonder if the attorney had any conversations to how that could possibly pose a risk as far as doing something and then backpedaling all of a sudden. Like, the court saying, well, why did you change your mind within, you did this for 4 or 5 years and now you stopped. Like, I'm just thinking on that level. Like I said, I'm not a professional in the lawyer world at all. These are just questions that I've had since I've been trying to dig into this.
Yeah, I would say that I haven't asked the town attorney that question specifically about by not flying the pride flag moving forward, that we've done it in the past, if that would be a cause for concern. he provided, like I said, a more restrictive version and then a less restrictive approach to this. I would say that similar to the POW flag, because it's something we've always flown, that if, you added the pride flag in with those four, I think you'd still be protected because there's a precedent there, just like there is for the POW flag. It's not going outside of anything we've done. The fact that we're suggesting right now that now we're saying you can't, I don't know what that does. I haven't asked him that question.
And that for me, it just took me off a cliff, and I was like, we've supported and raised the Ukrainian flag because of the conflicts going on overseas, and then we don't raise that flag anymore because we restricted certain things. And what if there's another conflict that United States is, supporting and wanting to fly in certain places, but we've got this now that's restrict us from even putting that. And when you go and make an exception saying, well, there's a conflict and we're fighting and we're supporting this thing, and I was like, okay, why'd you make the policy then if you're going to make an exception for only this or only that? So I'm sorry I was not at the initial conversation, but these were just questions that I had as I started really digging into it. And I'm only looking at individuals just because you guys are looking at me, so it's not directed at any one of you.
Just to answer your question about the Ukrainian flag, before we even brought up a discussion on a flag policy, actually it was at the start of the conflict, somebody had reached out to the town and had requested that the Ukrainian flag be flown. And not having a policy, I just went to Fred and said, or Mr. Town Manager, I said,
Actually, Bonnie was here still.
Yeah, maybe it was Bonnie.
He said, don't put that on me.
Yeah. And Bonnie said, we don't have a policy. It's really up to you what, the discretion of council, what they wanted to do. So I don't think I reached out to anybody. I just said, well, if this is being asked of us, we can do it. She said yes. 6-7 months later, again, before we took up the policy, we received an email from somebody who said, why is the town getting involved in a national conflict? We don't know what side people in this town are on. There's different opinions. Some people don't even have an opinion on that, but it's reflective of the town council or the town itself that we are taking a position on a certain side of a conflict. So town manager and I discussed it, and it was at that point we said, well, absent of any policy, somebody has a concern that flag is being flown, right or wrong, we took it upon ourselves to take that flag down. But that's where we kind of find ourselves today is, we don't have a policy for that being requested, nor taking it down because somebody is offended by it. So that led us to where we are today with this discussion.
Thank you for that, because I honestly did not know, and that was one of the questions I asked some of the teams, like, where did this come from? I want to know, like, the basis of it so I could properly analyze what's going on. So thank you for that, Mayor.
Mm-hmm. Any further discussion? Councilman Hill?
Thanks, Mayor. I think kind of in recognition of some of the folks that came up here tonight, I'd like to offer an amendment to the red line policy that we have here. So I'd like to make a motion to add after the word, the term following exceptions, quote, the town may fly the pride flag for the entire month of June in recognition of Pride Month, end quote.
Second.
And honestly, I don't want to kind of belabor this any further, but, we heard a lot of the same themes tonight. One, for me, is we already do this. We've done this for the past several years. It has been bipartisan in nature, so not adding this amendment removes this privilege that had been extended previously. So we're just codifying in policy something that we already do. So, and as we heard tonight, this LGBTQ community kind of, we heard, needs our support now really more than ever, and off of the heels of the the shooting in Colorado about a month ago, I think it would seem kind of tone deaf for the town to now, after that, we're going to take this privilege away. And beyond that, really, in terms of the nuts and bolts, this kind of follow our council's guidance. There should be no liability issues here. And I know some folks would probably feel uncomfortable, like, all right, hey, where do we draw the line? But first of all, I'm very comfortable about drawing the line here, but no matter what we do here, can and will be changed. That's one of the pillars of democracy. So just because we're not etching anything in stone here, this can and will be changed in the future. So in terms of where the line is, it's always going to be changed. So I hope this is seen as a friendly amendment, as this is something, that practice that we currently offer in the town of Wethersfield.
Further discussion on the amendment?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm in strong support of the amendment. I certainly think we should have a policy. We need to have a policy. It protects us. I would have, and am in support of the original policy as drafted by the town attorney and the town manager, but in recognition of the policy proposal we have in front of us, I think it's important that we support this amendment to support the community and to honor the tradition that we've had the last couple of years, that many of us have been at to support the LGBTQ community. And I'll note, I brought this article. This is from yesterday's Hartford Current. I'll just read the headline. Rise in anti-LGBTQ speech spurs fears of more violence. This is very important that our community stand with our LGBTQ community. Sorry.
Got to get the G in there.
Yeah.
The G in there.
Yeah, sorry, but yeah, my apologies. We stand with them, and that we're open and welcoming, and also in recognition, as Councilor Hill, that we've been flying the flag, and it feels like if we don't do that anymore, we isolate and we take that away and take away something that's very important to this community and our community as a whole. And also, this is a group that's been targeted nationally in the recent tragedy in Colorado, and that the hate is escalating, as I think we all know, but as evidenced by this article and many others. So I'm in strong support of Councilor Hill's amendment. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilman O'Connor?
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm going to preface my comments by first saying I wholeheartedly support the LGBTQ plus community. Every one of us up here pretty much wholeheartedly, I believe, supports that. We have friends, we have family, relatives, work colleagues, associates that are all in that community. Every one of us is related or connected somehow to people in that community. And so when I look at this motion and when I look at this flag policy, the thing that stands out to me the most is it's not about the flag. It's about politics. That's all this is about. Because if it wasn't about politics, we probably wouldn't be having this discussion. And I'm going to tell you why I feel that way. This was posted on Facebook by our state representative, Amy Bello, who came up and spoke. With this proposal, the pride flag will be banned on all flag poles in the town. I'm shocked that our council would entertain this policy. Who up here said it was going to be banned? Nobody. That was called what's known in political circles as let's drum up the beat, let's scare people to think, hey, the Republicans all want to prevent the flying of the pride flag. Well, I'll tell you something right now, I find that highly offensive because I find myself, and the way I'm raising my family and my kids is to be completely open-minded and accepting. And when I have people come up, and this is the problem with allowing any type of flags, is it creates winners and losers, and it puts the council in a position to pick who is going to get the flag and who isn't going to get the flag. And I want to repeat just some public comments that were stated here. If you don't support this flag, it means you're a coward. Not my words, that's public speak. You're betraying all LGBTQ plus people. Not my words, that's what they're telling me if I don't support flying this pride flag. And I take great offense to that type of language because that's not how I'm raising my kids. And so what you're doing is you're basically saying you're either with me or you're against all of us. And I look at flags in a very simple manner. Every one of us lives in the United States of America, and that flag represents everyone. And if you want to go down a step further, we all live in the state of Connecticut, as residents of the state of Connecticut, and that flag represents every group out there. And then you go down even further, and you say the town of Wethersfield. It is fully inclusive and receptive. But when you start to allow certain flags and not allow flags, that's where division comes in. And I find it highly ironic that the former mayor, who is now our state representative, hasn't been at a council meeting in 2 years, but comes to speak about a flag. I personally would rather have her come speak and tell us where she's going to get money to help fix our schools that the referendum isn't going to do, or where she's going to get money to improve our roads or lower our tax base. And here's the more ironic part, if you don't think this is about politics, why didn't she, when she was mayor, fly that flag? She was the mayor. She had total control, but she chose not to because it wasn't politically advantageous at that time. And this is the problem with when you have a policy that has exceptions, then the Ukraine flag, which I wholeheartedly think that would be a great flag to fly. But you know what? We have Russian residents in the town of Wethersfield. They might find that offensive. I personally don't know how, but they might. What if we flew the Blue Lives Matter flag? There's a lot of outcry against that, or the BLM flag. You know, and so you can go on, but a policy that allows some and not others creates division. It does not create unity. And if this council is up here voting on what we feel the town represents, well, I guarantee you're going to have people coming up here and calling you cowards and betraying people and controlling speech, and that we're not behind you. And that is, in the words of our state representative, that's carving out a bad policy. And she stated that, and she's absolutely right on that front, and that's where I agree with her, is not having a policy that includes any type of other flag than the main stalwart flags is bad government. And, you know, the comment about us being litigation adverse, we were elected to be fiscal stewards of this town. It would be irresponsible for us to intentionally go out there and pass something knowing that we could set ourselves up for a lawsuit. It's just bad government. And I'm going to close my comments again. I fully support the LGBT community. And I'm very hurt by the fact that people come up here and try to imply we don't. Because that's incredibly offensive, and it's a horrible assumption to make, but it's great political theater. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other comments on the amendment before us? Well, I'll reserve my comments after the amendment. Okay. Motion's been made and seconded.
Just clarification, Mayor, this is just for the amendment, and then you'll vote on the policy if it passes, or if not, then someone else will make the motion, correct? Just so everyone's on the...
Well, I think the underlying motion is still, well, no, we have to do a underlying motion.
Motion for the amendment, just the amendment.
Right, this one right here.
Yeah.
But then we'll have discussion on the policy. Okay, on the amendment before us, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Nay. Motion fails, I believe 5-4. Sue, you got that?
I don't have who. Can we do roll call, just so I have it correct?
Sure.
Counselor Biggs?
For the amendment.
Counselor Carbone?
Against, no.
Counselor Forrest?
For the amendment.
Counselor Hill?
For the amendment.
Counselor Lesser?
For the amendment.
Counselor O'Connor?
No.
Counselor Pentela?
Nay.
Deputy Mayor Mazzarella?
Opposed.
And Mayor Bell?
Nay.
Thank you.
Thank you. On to the underlying, well, we don't have a motion before us, but under the underlying policy before us, just a couple corrections, I guess. We have at the end before the number 1 commemorative or organization flags with the following exceptions. Do we need exceptions? We can take that.
Strike with the following exceptions if would end up owned or maintained by the town of Weathersfield.
Okay.
So that would be an amendment you need to make.
And a question about on school property. So these would be flags that are flown outside of school property, or outside of schools, but on school property?
So the way that it reads now is any property owned or maintained by the town of Weathersfield. So that would be all inclusive of all of our properties within the town. I was told to strike the excluding school properties, part of that previous discussion. Now, that does not, it's flown on flagpoles, so this, for that clarification, so that does not mean that the flags cannot be displayed in classrooms, inside the school buildings, in the library, in town hall, in anywhere. This is about flagpoles and flagpoles only. But as it reads now, it would include school flagpoles, unless you put the exclusion that was there originally.
Okay. And then with regard to the POW MIA flag, I did look at some, and I thank you, Councilman Hill, for mentioning this. I did look at some policies that other towns in Connecticut had taken up, and they, because of the grandfathering in of POW MIA flags, some of their policies have those flags only on veterans memorials. So does the town of Weathersfield have memorials, like military memorials on town property, veterans memorials on town property?
I'm not aware of a specific Veterans Memorial, particularly with any kind of a flagpole part of it. I know that there are markers in various areas, but I don't think there's any specific Veterans Memorial per se.
Okay.
Well,
I
there
think
is at the corner of Hartford Avenue and State Street.
Right.
And there's a flagpole there.
And there is a flagpole there.
For clarity for the council.
I just wanted to, just for discussion purposes and a possible amendment, that if there is a concern about grandfathering in a POW or MIA flag, that we make an exception that those flags be flown on designated veterans memorials, so that we can use just, fly the United States, state of Connecticut, in town of Weathersfield on town property, flagpoles on town property, including schools, outside of schools, and that POW MIA flag be flown strictly at veterans memorials. And just for discussion, and maybe we can wordsmith this if people agree. Councilman O'Connor?
I would just say this in reference to the POW flag, unless someone wants to make a motion to remove it, and then I'll tell you exactly where I stand when we vote on that. I look at that flag as, you know what, none of those flags might be even flying there, and I'm sure Councilor Biggs would agree with this, if not for them. And I think that's intricately tied to the American flag, because that American flag may not be there if not for our POWs or our MIAs. And so I feel that is one and the same in that regard. But if someone wants to make a motion to remove that, then, they obviously can do that.
Still in discussion?
Mm-hmm. Yes, you may.
Thank you, Mayor. I absolutely agree with you, Councilman O'Connor. My comments earlier were specifically to those who may not feel a part of some of those flags, just because we know some of the turmoils a lot of people go through in our world. And that's where my comments were. I absolutely will fly the prisoner of war flag wherever I'm at. I absolutely will fly the American flag wherever I'm at. This is just more so for the group of people who may not feel supported by those flags. That's where I just want to clear up my comments on those two flags.
Okay. Well, we need to then, what do we have for proposed language for tonight's?
Well, right now, you can either just strike with the following exceptions, make that amendment.
A period after Weathersfield?
Yep. Or if you want to address the POW MIA flag, to your suggestion, Mayor, you could say, you could take that out of the flags that will be flown and then leave with the following exception, that the POW MIA flag may be flown strictly at the Veterans Memorial. But we can, it's up to you if you want to do that or not.
I don't think I'm not looking at much support for that proposal.
So I would say leave it as is with just striking with the following exceptions in the period after Town of Weathersfield. So that would be the amendment you need to vote on first.
I'm just reading through.
Voting on the strikeout only, correct?
Correct.
We would strike with the following exceptions, period after the end of Weathersfield. Yeah, I can make the motion. So now that we have this before us, I just wanted to, comment after both Councilman Hill and Councilman O'Connor had brought up some of the discussion or the public comment that we had heard earlier tonight. And, I take exception to some of the comments that were made. It was, a request was brought to me in 2021 and again in 2022 to fly the pride flag for the month of June. And without hesitation, I accepted that request. And in fact, as folks had mentioned, many of us up on the council here took part in those flag raising ceremonies. In fact, I'm in one of the programs, having made remarks during the ceremony. I didn't do that for political gain. I didn't do it for recognition of any sort. I did it to simply show that we as a town of Weathersfield, and I can speak on behalf of this council, feel the inclusiveness of us and of the community for those that feel that they fall under the flag and celebrate in its display during the month of June. I also look at what else the town does, and not so much just what we as a body, and I've said it before about the proclamation, what the library does, and what town staff does, and the recognition that we provide for the LGBTQ community during the month of June. But I also look at what the community does year-round, and you just drive around my neighborhood. I did it tonight before I got here, and I saw pride flags being displayed at everybody's home. You see them more during the month of June, displayed proudly on people's front lawns. You see them in schools, you see them in classrooms, you see them on necklaces of teachers as they're greeting kids as they walk in to school. We're not taking that away. That display of inclusiveness goes throughout this entire town. And maybe, for the last 2 years, we raised the flag on town property, and that gave folks the idea that, I can take it out of my closet and I can put it on my front lawn, I can fly it, because this town is inclusive, and it is. But we're not voting against a pride flag. In fact, what we're doing is we're voting in favor of flags that are all-inclusive. We're not dividing one versus the other. And unfortunately, the debate, not the debate up here tonight, but the public comments presented earlier to Councilman O'Connor's comments puts a divisive wedge between what we're doing. And I really don't think that this is segregating one versus the other. Because if we did that, we would have that conversation every single time a request came up here. We would be pitting one versus the other. And I don't think it's the intent of this council that sets policy to also vote to pick winners versus losers, unfortunately. That's what we would be doing. So with this policy, and regrettably so, it comes from Boston, and where a Supreme Court decision, a national, U.S. Supreme Court decision, put us in this position well before, or well after, the request over the last 2 years to fly our own pride flag. So I almost feel that it binds us now to have almost an insurance policy. As Councilman O'Connor had mentioned, we are fiscal stewards, and we shouldn't be looking in the future for what is going, I'm not saying this is what he had said, but this is what others had said, that we shouldn't be looking in the future at a possible lawsuit. But that's exactly what we do when we hire an insurance firm or we purchase an insurance policy, is we're looking out for our own best interests, not only as of the town council and the town government, but for the entire public. So this is almost, if you will, a protection for us for future lawsuit that we wouldn't want to bind our town fiscally to have to fight. So just my comments on that. I don't know if anybody else has any comments, just general comments before we amend this policy. Councilman Forrest.
Thanks. On a technical matter, the beginning portion talks about flags on flag poles. And I know that the town manager discussed it's not the intent for this, it's not the intent for that. But at the end of the day, when we pass a law, it's the language of the law that matters. So even at the legislature, a legislator could say, I want it for this and this and this. But at the end of the day, the legislator from Ledyard is voting on the same piece of legislation as Tolland, and et cetera, et cetera. So they're voting on the language. And in this case, it talks about flag poles owned by the town of Wethersfield. So it's not like flag poles that are over 40 feet or under 10 feet or whatever. There are flag poles in classrooms, poles that hold flags. And I'm afraid from a technical standpoint that while we may say this doesn't include ones inside the classrooms, it in fact by language does include flags within inside the classrooms. It's what it sort of seems to me by just the reading of the middle. And it's not just classrooms, by the way. It could be flags on other municipal property, of course owned by the town, but it could be flags like we say at other locations, at baseball parks, right, wherever. And they may not be on a large flagpole, but they may be flown in different ways off of different types of poles. So I think that from a technical standpoint, just don't want, even at this level, to overreach into areas which cause us more. This debate to just come back up on the town council because there was an overstep there, but those are just some initial thoughts.
Do you have a suggestion for clarifying language, Council?
Yeah, that suggestion's not going to be able to be drawn out at this hour because there's a lot of ways in which the flags are flown which sort of have to be thought about. And I would, in order to come up with good language, that
You want to say exterior flag poles?
maybe more than a certain height, but then you'd have to, you'd have to think about what we just did and go through that process of where are our flagpoles and where are they located, just like we did with the monument at the corner of Harvard Avenue and State Street, to see if and when there is certain aspects of it. And then you get to the outside of a building, inside of a building, if it's a flagpole inside of a building, but it's not the Board of Ed building, and it's just, the whole discussion here is, it's a legitimate conversation. I respect all of the viewpoints at this dais and from the public. And it's extremely difficult to, of all the decisions that are both obvious and not obvious, it's one of the hardest sort of decisions that I've had to make if they're serving for this town. Even through the big budgets, like, you kind of get a feeling like, hey, I want to pave the roads, I want to build the schools, you want to have teachers, you know, that's generally an easier sort of a concept. But between the conversation that we could have, which is really a Supreme Court conversation, I can understand why the council and other councils around the state are probably struggling with exactly how to craft law which has both the respect of all but not diminish others. And I don't know if there's a magic bullet there, or magic language. Particularly for the language that I'm talking about, it's very hyper-technical. We have to think about a lot of situations to get there, and that's what good legislation does. It takes time and bouncing ideas back and forth of each other to get just the right piece. I don't think we're necessarily there yet. But I think the language that was offered by Councilor Hill was, in some respects, understanding of our past history, and yet also, and I'm respecting and listening to the thoughts, doesn't necessarily create this ever-ending flag debate at the council, too, about every flag that could come forward. And it's a balancing act, and I'm not sure we're going to get it right this time. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. But from a technical aspect, I thought I would share those thoughts about the flagpole, because we certainly don't want to come back with, I think, what other towns had the issue, which was now we're restricting things into schools. So at this point, I'm not sure the legislation is ready to be voted on in its current state, even if you were for just those certain flags in certain areas.
You know, may I say something? I'm sorry. And this is, Matt, this is to your point, Counselor Forrest, sorry. That right flagpole, the word flagpole, or that, I think the language does have to be altered, because what's to stop somebody from hanging it on the exterior of a building, or hanging it out the window, or doing it whatever they wanted to do with that? And then what kind of recourse? Like, who's going to be even, for lack of a better word, policing this? I hate to use that word, but is somebody, do we just go based on complaints? Like, I just feel like we're pushing a ball up a hill. It's so very difficult, this whole argument, this whole discussion, and I just want to say that I really appreciate, I think you did a great job kind of, and Mayor Rell giving an opposing viewpoint to everything we heard tonight, because that's not easy to do, because I think a lot of our hearts are entwined in that community, and we're trying to do the right thing by all of our residents, and you know, obviously people we love, so this really is a difficult decision, and I agree. Mr. Town Manager, is this something, like, what's the time frame on this? How?
No, we have to move. Again, there is no specific time frame. This is just a recommendation that's come forward based upon the Boston decision and other towns adopting policies that's being proposed to you. If you need to wait, you can wait, and I'll just keep telling people requesting flags that they're going to have to wait, because we don't have a policy.
I'd like to make a motion that we just simply add the text exterior flags on publicly owned town land. And if someone has to add a flag, you know, with town manager, you know, oversight or something to that effect, so it doesn't, I don't understand how publicly owned town land is going to affect, you know, my neighbor flying it on their yard, so I don't even think that's realistic. But I'm comfortable moving forward, and we can just add exterior what was the word we were going to use? Yeah, amend it to exterior flagpoles. Then it eliminates the need for anything flying in a school or anything else that the town owns. And since if you go around town, the only flagpoles that are flying right now outside, and we wouldn't be flying this kind of flag at a Mill Woods baseball diamond anyways, because that's an outside, again, publicly owned flag, pole. So if we just, do we have to make an amendment to an amendment, or can I just read off this and?
Yeah, I would just suggest if it, based upon what you just said, Councilor Connor, is that where it says, and the POW-MIA flag may be flown, I would just add the words, on the exterior flagpoles of any properties owned or maintained by the town of Weathersfield, period.
Perfect.
And then that would also be striking with the following exceptions from the language as previously discussed.
All right. So do I have to make an amendment to add that?
Well, yeah, no, you're still amending. We haven't,
All right, so I think we're done then.
Well, the main motion's on the floor.
yeah, the main motion's on the floor, but nobody seconded your first amended version. Yeah.
All right, so I'd like to make a motion that we add on exterior properties and remove with the following exceptions.
I would say on the exterior flagpoles of any properties.
What he said. Yeah, on the exterior flagpoles.
And then striking with the following exceptions.
Second.
Okay. So where it says may be flown, we've deleted or displayed on our version. May be flown on exterior flagpoles of any properties owned or maintained by the town of Weathersfield, period.
Yes.
Now, to Councilman Forrest's point, could we include in there, well, it's been made and seconded, but would we want to put in general, for display of in general public display, or is it if they're just out there exterior?
I think based upon the discussion I've heard, you don't want to do that, right? We're not looking to restrict schools from putting them in classrooms.
No,
Yeah.
but exterior
Public display.
flagpoles.
Yeah, well.
But they already are in the sense that they are exterior flagpoles.
Anything on the buildings themselves, town buildings I have the authority over, and if someone comes and says, I want to put a flag on the outside of your building, I'm going to say, no, there's no flags on the outside of our building. If it comes to, and the same thing with the interior of the building, I have jurisdiction over that. The superintendent has jurisdiction over those matters in the schools. So I would just kind of leave it at that.
Okay.
So we have a motion and a second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the proposed amendment? Councilman Forrest.
So, and this is, I think, why the reason, and we're really sort of legislating, at the dais here a little bit, but why I can't necessarily think about all the permutations. I'm imagining when we have a color guard, right, and you pick up the flag and you go outside, and they might have a flag that's not one of these four. Could you not have a flag like that at a color guard outside now? You're at the Catone Field, and they have other state flags there or something. And this is not, like, I admitted from the beginning, this is a awkward web. So it sounds like, in that instance, and I won't even use the pride flag as an example, like another flag, if you had a color guard or a presentation or Weathersfield High School flag, the Eagle flag, does it start to move in even a technicality to that? Because it's a flag on a flagpole, it's not the four. I'm imagining like college football, you go out and there's the big Texas flag, when you're down, and I get that it sounds absurd because it is absurd. Like, why would you not be able to fly the take a flagpole out in Catone Field with the Eagles flag after you win a great game, of course. But this is the legislation but if the legislation has an awkward result, I don't want that to happen. So,
I'm pretty sure that's not a flag pole, though.
I was gonna say that.
Pole is stuck in the ground.
doesn't say that it's a pole pluck in the
Would you
ground.
like to add stuck in the ground?
That's why we have to go through but like, wouldn't it be the display of a flag just if you were at a color guard at a parade? There's a flag on a flagpole that you hold like this, and the Boy Scouts and the police, they go down. That's not a flag stuck in the ground, so,
But I think
but
that
it's the
goes,
same display.
I think that goes back to who's policing it, and again, I don't like that word, but I feel like, what would somebody say? Well, please remove your flag. Well, by the time it gets to somebody, it's already gone because they've walked off the field, so.
Yeah, I think, but it's not about like the fine, right? Because then you have a violation of your own flag policy, and now other flags might want the same airtime, which I think goes to Boston. And then,
Well,
we run in, then we have the fiscal steward thing, in a way.
so one thing I'm just seeing, are those if they are flagpoles, so if you have like the Weathersfield Eagles coming out, or during the Memorial Day Parade, you have Troop 85 Boy Scouts holding their banner or flag, are they owned and maintained by the town?
If you had a Weathersfield High School flag by a Weathersfield High School student at Weathersfield High School grounds, that was a Weathersfield High School piece of equipment, I guess it would be. Town owns the stuff, right?
But you know.
Fixed exterior flagpole. All right? I'll add that to my amendment.
Fixed exterior flagpole?
I think everybody knows what the intent of this is, and we could do this with every resolution and every policy in the town and spend 10,000 hours debating ifs and ors and buts on it. I think we all know what the intent of this is, so if we want to add fixed exterior flagpole, then I will amend my amendment to put in the terminology fixed exterior flagpole.
Second.
Sue, you got that?
Yes.
Okay. Counsel over here, you got the amended version of the amendment on a fixed exterior flagpole? This way we take out the marching in parades or rooting for whatever team is playing. Okay.
So now we can't fly the Eagles flag on our fixed exterior flagpole. Catone Field, no Eagle flag. I mean, I get it, but that's why it's a sticky web.
Well, I think if we have this before us now and we come into any concerns, we can look to amend this to, I mean, I'm thinking of some others, but for the sake of time and getting something before us where we could, have it in black and white and be able to fix it or adjust it in the future, I think unless there's any further discussion on it. Hearing none? Okay, motion's before us on an amended version. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay?
Nay.
Ayes have it. Clarification for Sue? Did you need a roll call? If you did, I might be able to help you out. Take the exact opposite of the First Amendment. Okay. And again, if we need to adjust this in the future, we can, but it is before us now. And Mr. Town Manager, you're comfortable with that language? Okay. Moving on to, now that's the amendment. All those in favor of the motion, let's see.
Motion as amended.
Yeah,
You have to move the question of the motion as amended.
To approve the policy as amended.
Make a motion to approve the policy as amended.
Motion to approve the proposed Town of Weathersfield, Connecticut flag policy as amended. It's actually on there already.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay?
Nay.
Ayes have it, motion carries. Moving on to item 4B, citizen recognition guidelines. This is before us. I think Councilman Lesser, you had proposed this to the town manager. And we tabled it for those that weren't in attendance at the last meeting. Just some concerns with the way we were going about the key to the city, if I recall. And special recognition. I don't see it in my packet.
It's in there. I'll just note real quickly, some changes that were made since the last meeting based upon the discussion, some clarification on the committee itself, that it says now that it would be made up of citizen volunteers appointed by the town council for a term not to exceed 2 years. And then also the language added that the committee could also make recommendations to the town council for other types of recognition, including but not limited to naming of buildings, fields, other town-owned properties, and creation of honorary plaques, etc. So those are the changes that came out of that last discussion, but I think there was a lot more discussion to be had. So.
Councilman Lesser?
Thank you, Mayor. And Fred, thank you for those changes, and I appreciate the council's spirited discussion on this last time. The mayor brought up an excellent story tonight, and it's the type of thing that would, in my view, deserve some type of letter, potentially from the mayor. But those types of things we need to, in my view, formally recognize in this community that people are doing outstanding things that, in my view, deserve recognition, like the mayor's story tonight. And this committee would source those with town staff, and then this committee would specifically be responsible for coming up with a couple people a year, as some towns throughout the country do, to a higher level of recognition, and many organizations do, that I was calling Keys to the City. Certainly could be another name, but the highest level of recognition that people in Weathersfield have made some outstanding contributions to society, that we want to recognize at some event, luncheon, dinner. So it's kind of, and we talked about this last time, but I thought the mayor's story tonight was a great one, and it's the kind of thing that we want to, in my view, formally recognize, and then also have a process for naming buildings. If we want to have a building after someone in town, this committee that we're forming would help source some of that stuff. So it's just a kind of, and we talked about this last time, an effort to recognize the outstanding contributions that our residents have made to the town, to the state, and to our country. Thank you.
Councilor O'Connor.
Oh, thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Keep it short.
That's good.
Hey, Ken, I did ask, when we discussed this last time, I had asked about my concerns about politicizing that committee, and I thought we'd agree that we'd have one council member from each party in that committee, and that's not showing up in here.
So, if I may, Mr. Deputy Mayor?
Yes.
So, Councilor Connor, the proposal, and I'm open to different suggestions, amendments, changes, was not to have counselors on it, that it would consist of like 4 community members that are appointed, but not have council members on it, and trying to take the politics out of it like we do many things in town. I remember when we started the mayor's ball, for example, we specifically wanted that to be nonpartisan. This is intended to be this, and it's my intention that no sitting member of this body or state or national body should win an award. If 10 years from now we want to award you, Counselor O'Connor with some, or anybody for that matter, I'm just using it because we're
Lifetime
talking.
achievement.
But not while you're in office. I'd really like to take the politics out of it, but 10 years from now, if you had did something that we all deemed, or whoever the council was, the committee was, but it's a long answer. The short answer is it would not be a council committee, it would be a citizen committee.
So, and I understand that. I thought by having one of each and maybe one citizen each and having an even number, which forces you to get bipartisan support. And so by having one of each, to me, I thought would actually prevent that from happening, and then you each appoint a member, but the end of the result is you've got to get one of the other ones to go along with you on that. So it forces the bipartisanship. And I do think when you have council members on, it might have a different vibe than having, a bunch of people getting together and people being apprehensive about, I don't want to say no and this and that. And so that's why I just kind of thought that looked better. And then on the other side is, I was a little concerned about the vote process. I think it would be awful to nominate someone, let them know they were nominated, and then have a council vote it down, and they gave it to somebody else. And I didn't know what that process was going to look like. So if they come forward with 4 or 5 names and you're evaluating them in these committee, are they all going to know their names are up forward so that 3 of them are going to walk away feeling like they were, and voting on that in public, I think, if there was a no vote, I think it creates a division. And so I'm trying to figure out how do you do that, with avoiding that area of conflict.
So both fair points, and I'm open to having the committee comprised differently than I originally thought, and maybe having 2 counselors and 2 committee members. And Dan, I'll use a sports analogy. I thought, or I'm thinking, that it would be somewhat like a Hall of Fame vote, where someone has to make those decisions, and people select Hall of Fames in different sports. There are some folks that are not selected for various reasons, and some that are based on some criteria. My hope is, and my plan is, that the committee would develop certain criteria of how we would pick someone, again, for the highest award. I thought, like the mayor's story tonight, serve some official letter or something. I've said this before publicly, I'll say it again. I think we should be recognized the Puerto Vallarta, who's a Wethersfield resident, for all he has done for so many different organizations. But maybe that's a letter. But the committee would decide, or help decide, some of that stuff. So I'm open to those changes, Dan.
Would you be comfortable then if we table this and maybe you and I and some others kind of crafted something on that where we're all in agreement?
Sure. Yeah.
No, and I'm not, obviously, I'm not trying to stop it. I just want to make it.
I get the sense you want to make it better and tighten it up a little bit. And there's no rush to it, although my goal would be this would happen in 2023, and that we'd have a committee in 2023, and some time in 2023, we'd have some, hopefully, luncheon where we're honoring a few people. That's the goal. So, yeah, all good. And I'm sorry, Mayor, I didn't ask for you, usually I should go through the chair, so I was
He
just.
wasn't there.
No. Deputy Mayor.
Mr. Deputy Mayor first, and then Councilwoman Carbone.
Yeah, first I want to say, initially I thought this is a great idea, and after talking about flags, and, no, it's serious. I feel like we're still picking winners and losers, and I'm uncomfortable with that. And, you could say, well, you'd have it in a closed-door meeting or something, and, the committee would pick and that kind of thing, but it's a small town and things get out, and, some individual might have kind of gotten the unofficial nod that he was going to be the gold key recipient, and then it doesn't turn out that way. And I'm kind of questioning, do we really need to have like this formal policy when we haven't had it for so long? And then you say, well, you don't want to politicize it, yet it turns into 2 from one side and 2 from the other. So it becomes political. And I don't think that's anybody's intent. It's just, it happens. So I'm comfortable with trying to take some time and work it out. And you should get Attorney Forrest involved because he's very good with all this.
He's got a,
I don't know about 2023, though. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Councilwoman Carbone?
Thank you, Mayor. I was just curious about the proclamations. Don't you do something with proclamations as well, and how does this differ from when the mayor gives a proclamation to people? Because I know just at the Veterans Day ceremony, he gave a proclamation. I'm just trying to see how that would differ, and do we really, I think this, I love when people get recognized, but I just didn't know how, and then if it is a money, and again, we can all hash this out, like you said, maybe if we can all get together and kind of do this not in this forum, but my question would be money, obviously, so if you talk about a luncheon or whatever, I think it's completely inappropriate to ask somebody to pay for their own luncheon. It was something you had mentioned last time, if they're getting an award. Call me old school, but I don't. So I guess my question would be, how is it different from a proclamation that the mayor would give, and then where the money would come from to do any additional stuff? Yeah, it's true.
I have some thoughts on that, but I'm going to go back to Councilor O'Connor's suggestion, because I think it's a good one, that maybe we take some of these offline, and over the next month or so, we kind of iron this out, bring it back to this body, tighten it up a little bit, and hopefully get it to a point where everyone's comfortable, or at least 5 people are comfortable, moving forward, that they think this is something we should do in Wethersfield. I feel strongly about it, and we'll continue to advocate that way, but we can tighten it up. So I have some thoughts and responses to that, but I think the better way is to take it offline with the rest of the council.
I'll make a motion to table.
Hang on, just before we...
Recognize that, Counselor.
I know who's not getting the key.
He's the number one best deputy mayor the town's ever had, according to what, body
So, thank you, Councilman Lesser, for, bringing this forward. I just want to say that for that individual that I had mentioned earlier in my comments earlier, we did present him with a citation from the town, and it was well received. There was some concerns because he does have a guardian. That's why I hadn't been able to mention anything. They needed to, vet it through the guardian on whether or not, he would be recognized by the town and all that. So that would come into play with a lot of this as well. But I do like the idea, and I'm sorry I had to excuse myself, but if it was Councilman O'Connor's idea that we have a bipartisan, so maybe the language would be, one from the minority, one from the majority, and then 2 or 4 members of the public, maybe a committee of 4 with 2 counselors. Again, similar to what we do in an official, unofficial way, where we go through a screening committee for the Democrat and the Republican town committee for boards and commissions, that, it's vetted through a bipartisan, just to keep any kind of partisan, feel to it out of the process. So we can all discuss that in the future. So, yeah, and I think we've got plenty of time now that we've got a full council here to discuss this, that maybe we can talk over the break between the 2 council meetings to come up with tighter language on this. Councilman Lesser.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm fine with tabling. I'm just asking if the council, it's okay if Councilor O'Connor and I work on it, or do you want to have others in the group? But I like the suggestion that maybe the 2 of us work on it. Are you okay with that, Mayor?
The 2 Hall of Famers. No Pete Rose up here. So, yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Dan, I'll take you out to breakfast.
No, it's a great idea. I just, there's some points where Deputy Mayor's correct. If word gets out that somebody's going to be recognized, and they're going to vet this through a process, and then their name is never called, that we just have to tighten it up a little bit. But I think it's a great idea for the town and everything else that the town manager had included with other formats for how we go about, or guidelines for other recognition processes that we do. I think it's great language to tighten up what we already have in existence. And that one in particular, we can really come to a consensus on over the next.
Thank you.
And it's during the holidays, so I think everybody will be working together.
All good.
Okay, so motion to table item, now I gotta go back to the agenda. 4B, citizen recognition guidelines, to the next council meeting.
So moved.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Motion carries. I don't believe we have any ordinance or resolutions for introduction tonight. We do have the CIF fund, or Community Investment Fund. This is a grant to the community center. I know Kathy Bagley is here, and Joya, both working with State DECD and the Community Investment Fund for this. And
We
I,
have this map that was added later. Derek's been working on it. We can display it on the screen for everyone else if you want. No, it's up to you.
If you make it bigger, you can read it.
It's not part of the packet, that's why I'm mentioning it.
okay.
You want it displayed?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Everybody's got a copy of it, and if the public wants to see it, we can provide copies for them as well. But this would be well, by way of background, the Community Investment Fund was created by the legislature last legislative session. This is, I believe, 2 allocations of $175 million twice a year for the next 5 years. I think they call it the CIF 2030 fund because it does go out into 2030. Weathersfield is one of just a handful of towns that would be eligible for community investment funds. There was one allocation by the state already, I believe, in the fall. The second one is coming up in January, and this one would go for that that meeting, if I'm not mistaken, in January. And we're looking at $5 million of improvements to the Pitkin Community Center. So with that, I'll turn it over to Joya and Kathy to discuss.
Sure. This grant opportunity, we're just asking permission tonight to apply for the grant. After much discussion with staff, we came up with the idea of going for the community center improvements for the Community Investment Fund. And it all started because with the community center itself, one of the key issues we always hear, particularly from the senior citizens, is the parking is farther away from the building, and to get to the west wing takes them a long walk. And one of our plans in the capital improvement program was always to put a parking lot behind the building that was close to the building. And that got us started talking about the parking at the facility. Then we talked about the access, the accessible access at our doors, that many of our doors are still, they're the push doors, they're not all automatic. Then that got us looking at the parking lots, how much parking we had. Then, of course, once we started looking at that, we looked at the interior of the building that we've always talked about, the air conditioning unit for the banquet room. And then we looked at all the rooms in the community center, and we were trying to see what would work as far as accessibility, safety, automatic doors, looking at all those pieces. And then we also looked at the complex, which is the William J. Pitkin Community Complex, which takes in the ball field, the pool, and the accessible playground that we have at Greenfield. And it was recognized that we didn't have accessible parking spaces at the Greenfield playground where there'd be ADA parking there. And then we recognized that the driveway to Willard Pool is in disrepair. And so we kind of looked at it as a big project and started talking about could we qualify for what they were asking? And we thought we could, and we've been working on a grant application to kind of incorporate all those pieces to, they use the word transformative all the time, to make a difference at the community center, because as we've identified, our numbers show that over 100,000 people are in the building every year. And the building hasn't had improvements since 1996. We've done little things throughout the years, but nothing to really bring it into the 21st century.
Thank you. Anybody with any questions or comments? Councilman Lusser?
Thank you, Mayor. First, Joya and Kathy, and the town manager, thank you for your work on this. This is a real important opportunity for us. It was just announced last week about the fall fundings. I think 24.6 million was in the press, including Rocky Hill getting money for the old Ames Plaza and a lot of our neighboring towns. And this puts us at the table, Weathersfield. This gets an opportunity. We may have missed some opportunities in the past for some critical state grants and state funding. I don't want to see our neighboring towns getting all their fair share and Weathersfield not. And the community center really needs it. And I think it's a great starting point, and I'm encouraged that we're at the table and asking for this money, and I hope the state delivers. But I wanted to thank you for all your work in getting us ready to apply for this community investment fund grants. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Mr. Deputy Mayor?
Are we using this grant writer that we
Yes.
hired or contracted with?
Yes, the grant writers helping pull all this together for us. We've been, they've been, Joya and Kathy can tell you, but they've had numerous meetings with the grant writer to go over this. One of the main aspects of this grant is it has to serve a segment of the population, the underserved segment of our population, and that's another reason why this is such a great location for that, because everybody in this town uses this facility sometime or another. And so it really touches all the critical points for the grant, and that grant writer's making sure that that's delivered in a way that gets that message across and putting the pieces together. Now, this is an aggressive approach. That's why we phased it out. So even if they say that they're going to give us phase one, we'll have to reapply for phase two kind of thing. But we're going to ask for the whole thing, but we're going to do it in phases so that they have an opportunity to say, we'll give you phase one, but you're going to have to come back for phase two after you show, the use. But yes, we are using that grant writer.
And just a question for Kathy. Is there like a breakdown of that 115,000 people using the facility? Like, I'm curious about people renting the banquet room for, whatever, wedding party or something like that.
We do track all those numbers. So I don't know it off the top of my head, but we do have it by rentals, by park and rec programs. There's a couple different categories that we do track in the building.
And kind of unrelated, are all the rooms utilized in the community center? Is there any opportunity for using some of the space for something else? Or they're all spoken for?
They really are. I mean, we work really hard to meet the needs of the community if people come to us and ask us for space for different things. My staff always kids about wanting to put an addition on the building, but I didn't put that in this request, just because there are many uses for the space. Now, is every room used, 24/7? That's not the case, but they are used. The west wing, the back 4 rooms are this part of the senior center, but the senior center is the whole building because they get to use everything else also. But those are sort of dedicated to them during the day, and we use them at night for other things. So if people had requests, though, they can reach out to us and we could see what their needs are and what we could do. And we're picking up again on our private rentals.
Good, thank you.
Would any of this funding be allocated for activities that go on within there? Or is it strictly for capital improvements?
It's strictly capital improvements.
Okay.
Yeah.
And maybe indoor pickleball.
Well, that's what I was getting at,
Indoor pickleball, but it's not.
but
part of
it's
this.
not part of this.
We are talking about that.
I'm going to keep asking you about that.
We'll call it the Ken Lesser Court, but it has to run through this.
Bipartisan committee, don't let them know first. Somebody may object.
Paint one side red, the other side blue.
Okay, any other questions for either Joy or Kathy or Mr. Town Manager on this before we proceed with applying for it? Seeing none? Okay.
Here's the motion to authorize.
Undo it.
I have it, but if, Deputy Mayor.
Make a motion to authorize the town of Weathersfield to apply for a State of Connecticut Community Investment Fund grant up to $5 million for improvements to the William J. Pitkin Community Complex.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Motion's before us. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and good luck to yourselves and
We'll keep our fingers
the
crossed.
grant writer. It's coming up, is this, you're going to do this into January?
Yeah.
Due January 6th.
Yep.
The funding won't be announced, though, for about at least 6 months after that, so
Okay,
we'll wait.
thank you.
Anticipation.
We had already approved the minutes before us. Second, public comment? Yes, sir. And just a reminder, if you've already signed in, you don't have to sign in again, but state your name, address, and you're limited to 5 minutes.
Nick Ross, 125 Walcott Hill. Just clarification, in the Pitkin Community Center, there's a preschool as well. It's not just the senior center. Secondly, for the VOIP discussion that took place earlier, Charles Wright actually does not have a functional intercom that works in the hallways. So just want to throw that out there, as we're going to have here in the town hall versus the actual schools that have children. So the safety concerns that were raised, I think, should be doubly as important in the school system. And lastly, I want to take some time to talk about what happened earlier tonight. I will not delve into political theater. I can honestly say that hearing the town owns and maintains building, the town is made up of people. It's not all of you here, it's everybody. And I heard there's a privilege to fly the flag, and that, I think, is the tenet that I want to focus on the most. The whole concept of the shut left case was the Establishment Clause, and whether or not the government speech or public free speech under the First Amendment of the Constitution could be had. That was the underpinnings. The Establishment Clause says you can't endorse or force a religion, hence the Church of England, and one of the reasons we're here today. With that being said, hearing that we can't make a policy that's happy for everybody, how about first in, first up? There are 52 weeks in a year. If more than one person requests a week, you take a lottery. You win your week, you don't win your week. It's all fair, it's content neutral. I don't really care if a 5-foot by 9-foot flag offends you. The people that came up here earlier, and it was focused on, everybody's very supportive of the LGBTQ plus community, definitely appreciate it, support them as well. The whole idea of the flag being up isn't about it's dividing them, it's recognizing the struggle. And it's appreciating the struggle and saying to these people, you do matter, here's a flag, we're going to represent it in our government and show that you have an equal stake in what we're doing. The concept that the American flag is inclusive, the last 200 years or so has quite a few instances where that's not the case. It just is a fact. Then secondarily, first in, first up, a lottery, it was simple. Congressman, I gave you a promotion. Councilman Forrest actually mentioned how poorly written this was as an ordinance. The town attorney wrote that. I've seen a lot of work product from a lot of attorneys in a lot of years. It was pretty bad. So I would recommend, although you could say you can fix it after the fact, that was disheartening at most. I would say also, when we talked about grandfathering in and carving out, again, first in, first up. It's a lottery. Everybody gets equal say. If it offends you, that's too bad. Councilman Rell mentioned the Gadsden flag, which has been co-opted by a particular political subset some people don't agree with. Some people do. Ukraine versus Russian flag. The whole point of this is, at the end of the day, that's why the U.S. Army had to adopt regulations that allowed a satanic cult to have a religious ceremony on base. Content neutral. This is so disheartening and so disappointing to me. The people that came up here to Councilman O'Connor's commentary, there was some language used that I might not have agreed with, but you know what? It's free speech. We had a chance today as a town to become a tenant of free speech and a beacon, and we weren't like every other town that said only these 4 flags or only these 3 flags could be in. We chose not to. And I can honestly say, with the affiliation next to my name on the voter rolls, I've been disappointed a lot over the last 12 or 14 years, even further back than that, probably the last 20 years. Today's one of those moments. I'm honestly disappointed. I'm not mad. I kind of figured it was going to happen anyway. I'm disappointed. And the fact that I'm disappointed is purely because there was an easy out, and we chose not to do it. We said somebody else is doing it this way, we should do that too. And I'll end with this. If this is truly the path we want to go down as a town, and we want to represent every person in Wethersfield this way, then I would argue, I took a 2-minute walk down the hall here. Guess what? There's a decoration on the door that says Merry Christmas. Last time I checked, it's not a secular holiday. It's a religious holiday. In fact, it's the second day of Hanukkah today. In theory, that's violative of the Establishment Clause, but it's up in Town Hall. Everybody seems to be okay with that. What we can't do is we can't say, you know what, totally content neutral, you want a flag up? Put your name in the hat. The fact that we couldn't do that today leads me to question a lot of things, least of which is my political affiliation.
Yes, sir.
I don't believe I signed it. I wasn't aware of anything like that. I'm Paul Milne, 52 Livingston Street. And now for something completely different. It's late. You're all tired. A lot of hard work. Now that I got you on my good side, I noticed in Facebook on the Wethersfield group that we have that's pretty popular with. There's news that comes up there, the administrator puts things up, and I noticed they're talking about the speed limit on Main Street being 30 miles an hour. And I went, holy crap, the speed limit on Main Street is 30 miles an hour, and they're going to lower it to 25. Well, why don't we lower it to 20? As long as we're changing all the signs, let's do it in one shot. Because it's a small town, it's a small street. And put up a sign that says strictly enforced at the same time. I mean, I pay attention to that. I like it when I go through a small town that's got character. It's attractive. We've had movies filmed here. I'm trying to sell my point a little bit. But, you know, it only takes a few more seconds to get from one end of Main Street to the other. It's not that big. And do we want somebody, I mean, I can't imagine flying down to the Cove at 30, especially with the road all rough. We talked about there are trailers bouncing around and all that good stuff. So we're going to make it 25, and big deal, make it 20. See, if you got any pull, why not? And the other thing, it was kind of crazy that I happened to show up with this topic tonight, and I walk in, the police department is here talking about violations. Well, I think Connecticut has a culture of rolling through stop signs, and I saw they're actually giving citations out for rolling through stop signs. I don't want anybody to get a citation, but it is another thing, pedestrian safety. When I come to a street and somebody's rolling through the stop sign, I'm standing there as a pedestrian, they're not seeing me because they're way up there in the intersection already. I step out and I'm squished. It is pretty common knowledge that pedestrian fatalities are going up in the state, and that's probably one thing. So I just brought up the rolling stop sign thing because I really do think, this is a totally separate topic, I really do think that the stop signs at the railroad tracks are ridiculous. I don't know if I've ever seen anybody, I've probably seen someone, maybe a transit bus, but make it a yield. If we have any recourse, I don't know if the railroad has to enforce it, because they're not stopping anyways. So if your argument is, well, yield, then they won't be stopping, well, they're not stopping now. So what's the point? So all it does is promote a culture of rolling through another stop sign. And that one's kind of obvious, that we're going to roll through that. There's no reason to stop there. People are rolling through, and the train's coming. You're not going to miss it. It's just not going to happen. So it's just kind of silly, in my opinion. But more importantly, you know, the thing that I really wanted to say is, let's just have people going through town at 20 miles an hour. and take an extra 10 seconds to get from one end of the street to the other. And just promote a little awareness, pedestrian safety, put up strictly enforced, and believe it or not, because I said the same thing on Facebook and somebody commented right away, it's got to be enforced. Well, I just saw it tonight. It is enforced. They are doing that for good reason, so people don't get squished. That's it. It's a long night. Thank you all for being here. You really work hard. I was very impressed. I didn't want to raise my hand and jump up earlier because I didn't want to water down everything else that was going on. So I got the privilege of sitting here and listening to this whole shebang tonight. It was a lot of hard work. You'd be commended on what you did.
Thank you. We'll be back twice next month, so. And we are doing improvements to Main Street. I don't know if you know that the speed hump is there, as well as the narrowing of Main Street even further down, north of the intersection of Church and Main Street. They are going to put another crosswalk there and narrow it for the visual to make people slow down, so.
Yeah, no, I definitely saw that.
Yep.
Just make it point.
Anybody else? Mr. Young?
Good evening again, Robert Young, 20 Copper Mill Road. Yeah, the speed bump is supposed to calm you from, if I think Mr. Gregor had mentioned, but I didn't see any calming as I went over it. I just think it's annoying. I'm going to start off again where I left off. I was talking about the pondering of the future for the school system. And the school manager, the superintendent and his crew are still complaining about roofs and AC units. They're also complaining about addressing curriculum and social-emotional learning. I mean, they've been working on this for centuries, or decades anyway. I guess it just never ends, does it, with these people? But the roofs and the units, I know I've sat in these meetings where they've been approved to have roofs repaired. I don't know if they had them repaired. I've sat in these meetings, and they've had AC conditioners put up on the roof. So I don't know. And then, of course, we had a boiler put in one of the buildings that was going to be projected to be taken down. Terrible. Just plain terrible how we run this town. I would suggest and urge very strongly that as they go forward to work on only one building at a time, and I would suggest and urge very strongly that they start with the Charles Wright School and renovate that first to show that their mistake and disenfranchised of that whole school district, that they can turn that around. If they don't do it, shame on them. I had made some comments at an earlier town council meeting. I guess it was in October 17th. And the comments were regarding the Keisha Farm and the Connecticut State Register of Historic Place registration form. Remember, it was a number of pages of history of the family. And of course, the duty was to identify that the barn itself had a distinctive purpose in its lifetime. And I had made comments about, when George Washington was coming through town during the war, riding Morgan and Grayskin, if he had stabled his horses there, now that would be a distinctive barn that you might want to save. But we know that nothing happened there. The Keisha family didn't have anything whatsoever in fancy cows or anything regarding agriculture. Just this week, or maybe it was November 27th, there was an article in the Hartford Courant about a farm that, and just to give you a quick example of something that is distinctive, something that would be a real eye-opener and a brag. It just won't be in Wethersfield. But this is about a farm in Goshen, Connecticut, where a woman and her husband have been running this farm for years. And what they do is they feed their cows the finest, sweetest hay, natural feeds, resulting in signature cream milk and artisanal chocolate-lined milk house chocolates made with fresh orchard fruits, garden herbs, and honey. Now, I read that and I was like, what the hell is all this about? And the barn is designed to keep the cows happy. The barn, the way the family takes care of the animals, it's all a high-level kind of a product that they're ending up putting out, which is candies. Can you imagine that? Candies for milk, and the milk. They even have, the cows have names. There's particular cows that will only produce a certain kind of a milk to make a certain kind of a candy. And when she's dry, they don't make any more candies. They have to wait until she comes back in fresh again. And the whole thing is fantastic, how these people have designed a product using their cows, making their property a very distinctive piece of property, something that our writers from the, what were they called? The heritage consultants. They wrote that article on the Keisha farm that was a disgrace, an absolute disgrace. If the Keisha farm family had done anything of the sort of famous, make themselves famous, make themselves unusual and distinctive, maybe that old barn would have some value. But it doesn't have a nickel's worth of value. Nothing spectacular happened there.
Thank you, Mr. Young.
Looking forward to seeing your report on the Keisha farm. Thank you.
A motion to adjourn, Mr.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Motion to adjourn made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.